I'll sign that non-disclosure statement.
Welcome. I'll just call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 2005 of the Toronto Transit Commission. We do have quorum now, and it's going to be a tight quorum, I think, all day. So if commissioners have to leave for any reasons, just give us a heads up so we can take care of that. Do we have any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act?
I had one and it resolved itself over the break.
Okay.
You lost a client?
No, it's simpler than that. The ownership of the property in question has changed.
Okay, so no interest to declare.
I was unaware of.
Can I have Commissioner Lalonde move the minutes of the previous meeting? All in favor of that? Any opposed? No, that carries. Just as before we go through our agenda, as a bit of a housekeeping item, we have on item number 8, which is the McNichol Bus Garage, Nelson Wan has asked to be added to that, to the speakers list to present. So if I could have a motion from Commissioner Mihevik to add that to the list. All in favor? Opposed? None. That carries. Item number 23, we've had a request from Councillor Gord Perks to be added and Reverend Karen Harrison. There may be others, but at this point, can we just add a motion to add those two? And we appreciate the effort from some in that community to maybe consolidate some of the speakers list just because of the length of the agenda and everyone's time being precious. So all in favor of adding those two to number 23 as speakers? Opposed? None. That carries. So we'll go through the agenda, noting that a bunch will have to be held where there are presenters. The CEO's report I will hold. ACAT minutes, number 2, I will hold. Number 3, I will also hold because we're appointing new members. Number 4, the TYSSE procurement authorization contract. Move to staff recommendation by Commissioner Mihevik. All in favor? That carries. 4A, could I have someone move the actions taken in camera? Moved by Commissioner Lalonde. All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Number 5, with no conflicts at all, would someone like to move the actions taken in camera? Commissioner Lalonde, all in favor? That carries. Number 6, Commissioner Mihevik moves approval. All in favor? Opposed? None. That carries. Number 7, Commissioner Mihevik again moves approval. Get his numbers up. All in favor? Opposed? None. That carries. 8, we're going to hold for that deputant. Number 9, we're going to hold. 10, we have a presentation, so I will hold that. Oh no, 10 is, no, sorry. There is a presentation. Number 11, capital delivery review.
We got a deputation.
For 11?
Yep.
Okay, let's see.
No DEP on 11.
So there is not a DEP on 11.
Okay.
Did people want to speak to it? It is. Moved by Commissioner Lalonde. All in favor? Any opposed? No. Number 12 is the procurement authorization for easier access Phase 3 at Royal York Station. Moved by Commissioner De Laurentiis. All in favor? No opposed. That carries.
It's just great to see how many,
I agree.
see some people from our ACAT committee, just how many purchases of property and agreements are being made with adjoining property owners and so on this agenda, which really speaks well to our hurry-up offense around accessibility in our subway stations. And, you know, I know some staff have been really working hard on this file, and they're to be commended.
Yeah, 3 stations in one meeting. That's good work. That's pretty good. Procurement authorization on our SAP system for technical assistance is item number 13. No one needs to hold that. Moved by Vice Chair Heisey. All in favor? Any opposed? No, that carries. Number 14 is procurement authorization for supply of Thermo King air conditioning parts for buses. Does anyone need to hold that for questions or comments? Moved by Commissioner Min Wong. All in favor? Any opposed? No, that carries.
15, 16, 17, I'll get that.
15, 16, 17 presentations on those. Number 18, Islington Station, Mississauga Transit License Extension. Moved by Commissioner Mihevik. Staff recommendations, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. The 3050 Pharmacy Avenue, I believe former neighborhood of Brad Ross, antenna lease renewal. He does not have to declare a conflict. Moved by Commissioner Min and Wong, all in favor? Opposed, none. 4050 Yonge Street entrance connection to York Mills Station. Moved by Commissioner, staff recommendations are moved by Commissioner Mihevik, all in favor? Opposed, that carries. 21 is the 2015 Annual Report on Diversity and Human Rights Achievements. I will just move that, saying that we did deal with this at the Human Resources and Labor Relations Committee, and there's a lot of excellent work being done. Even the TTC has been recognized on this front for this work, and so to keep prodding and pushing. And I think it's a bar that you've set that other city agencies can look to hopefully achieve too. And with that, I'll move staff recommendation. All in favor? That carries. Opposed? Oh, sorry, opposed? No, it carries. 22, proxy to vote TTC shares in Toronto Coach Terminal, Inc. Do we have to do anything beyond move the recommendations? Moved by Commissioner De Laurentiis. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Item 23 will hold. That's the item that I added to the agenda, and that we will have some speakers on. So just for clarity for everyone in the room, we have we're going to go through items 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 23. And with that, we'll go to item...
18 was approved.
No, oh, sorry, 18 was approved. My apologies. So with that, we'll go to item number 1, which is the CEO's report, and I'll ask our CEO just to give a few introductory comments to the report in front of you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, a quick introduction. Last month in the board meeting, we said goodbye to Dawn MacDonald, who is a long-serving member of the TTC staff and who was the clerk to this and coordinator to this commission and committee. I'd like to introduce just over to my right, Chris-Anne Finnerty, who has replaced Dawn. So welcome, Chris-Anne. She was previously the council committee coordinator for Newmarket Council. So welcome to Toronto, Chris-Anne, and welcome to the Commission. In terms of comments, I'll keep them fairly brief. You've got the report in front of you. This is data up to the end of October 2016, but of course it's kind of timely to make some comments about the end of another busy year at the TTC, which was also year 4 of our 5-year plan. So where we said we would modernise TTC top to bottom within 5 years, people, processes and infrastructure. As my opening paragraph says, I think we're in good shape. I think we're progressing nicely down that road. Obviously there's been a lot of challenges on the way. The things in terms of the actual service operation is not as good and as reliable as we would want it to be yet, but we're working on that. In terms of our mega projects, Spadina will open at the end of next year. The Spadina extension, it will be Wi-Fi, Presto and ATC equipped. It will be a stunning subway extension that will open at the end of next year. In parallel, the rollout of Presto continues apace. Some time ago, we achieved all the streetcars would be fitted with Presto equipment. We're very shortly about to announce that all the buses, all 1,900 buses have been equipped, all Wheel-Trans units have been equipped, and as promised, by the end of this year, every station will have at least one entrance equipped with Presto. So again, huge progress on Presto. Some issues with reliability, and we'll talk about them on the agenda later on today, but we're working very closely with our suppliers, Metrolinx, and through them their suppliers to get that reliability improved. Third mega project is ATC, automatic train control. That will go live, subject to some final tests. That will go live on the first phase of Line 1 next fall, and that's between DuPont and Wilson. All being well there, that will then be the live signalling system within the Spadina extension up to Vaughan at the end of December 2017. Mega project number 4 is new streetcars. We had that revised schedule some time ago from Bombardier. They promised us that they would deliver a minimum of 30 new streetcars by the end of this year. That will be achieved. There's the new, the 30th vehicle is arriving imminently. Now, clearly, it's still got to be accepted. It's got to go through its 600-mile tests. But on the assumption that that goes fine, we will have met that milestone of 30 new streetcars in service by the end of the year. And we're still working with them on what the offer will be for next year. It will be a minimum of 70. So that's 70 cumulative, another 40 in addition. And the 5th mega project, which we continue to really push on, is that of cultural transformation, making you feel valued like a customer, not just getting you new vehicles and subway extensions and all the rest of it. So that is progressing. We're waiting for the results of our most recent employee engagement survey. And then a huge number of other business transformation projects happening in parallel. The rollout of SAP, the rollout of Vision, CAT AVL, and also an all-out focus on basics, on getting the subway, the SRT, Wheel-Trans, and the buses and streetcars to run more effectively. So just a quick commentary on performance. Mixed bag, really. You can see the scorecard before you. We seem to be having a lot of priority 1 incidents, and that was covered by one of the national newspapers just the other day. That's not unique to the TTC. I was speaking with the CEO of Go just the other day, and they too are also experiencing an uplift in those tragic events. Financials, take your questions on those. The year-end position will be around about $1 million adverse when you factor in the drop in ridership and the loss of revenue that brings, offset against various savings that we've made. I appeared before the budget subcommittee yesterday in the first of the public hearings, and the delta that we currently have is $50 million delta between what we found in savings. If you take the city figure, or $70 million if you take our figure, the difference being accounted for by a number of items that we believe are legitimate to go into the city's account, and the city respectfully disagree with us. I think that was largely it. Accessibility matters. I echo, Chair, what you just said. It's fantastic that we're now really pushing ahead with our accessibility projects. So I'd just like to say publicly, on behalf of, for my staff, I'd like to thank every one of my management team, and the admin team, but also the 14,000 other members of TTC staff who I think have done stellar work this year. It can be a bit of a thankless task at times, but I think 2016 we really moved ahead, and we're sitting very pretty for modernising the TTC and delivering a transit system that makes Toronto proud by the end of next year. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a bunch of questions. I'll start with Vice Chair Heisey.
So Andy, I was riding my bike up Beverly St. George last night, and I tried to visualize someone in a Wheel-Trans vehicle pulling over to the curb and getting onto the sidewalk, and I realized you couldn't physically do it because of the snow pile that's there. So then it got me to thinking about access to the curb throughout the city and the whole issue of snow removal, and I realized, I'd never given it the deep thought I did yesterday, what a big problem it must be. So what have we said to transportation? Do we have an idea of how we could address that problem, have designated snow clearing zones for certain addresses? And what's a solution to that big question?
Okay. So every year when the cold weather hits, we go through this with our colleagues at the city, and we stress to them the need to maintain bus stops, but also other areas of egress, say streetcar stops. We need to have those cleared, and we need to make sure that where customers egress off surface vehicles in particular, that those areas are kept clear. And by and large, that is achieved, but there's invariably some areas that get missed, and it's certainly something that Mazen and I have discussed at ACAT. So that is something that we will keep on our radar. We always go through this issue with the city at the start of the cold weather period. The other thing that we are working to achieve is many more level points of egress, so level platforms onto which people can alight. off a bus or a streetcar, and making sure that clutter, such as those newspaper bins, don't get in the way of wheelchairs, because that's still a bit of an issue out there.
Okay, so my question really was about wheel-trans curb access. So it strikes me that we don't really have an answer for that right now. I don't know if anybody's got any comments on that, Eve, but it strikes me that maybe we need, so where does a wheel-trans operator, if they're going to drop someone off at an address, and the entire block that they're visiting has a snow-filled snow pile, snow drift beside the lane, where do they go?
Well, they're supposed to look for somewhere safe to drop, but I might ask Eve Wiggins, the head of Wheel-Trans, to answer the detail, please.
So that's exactly what they're supposed to do, is look for a driveway or an entrance.
I see.
The location itself has a driveway or an entrance, and that the owner of the property is supposed to be keeping it clear for their own residents, potentially, or customers if it's going into a commercial space. If we hear from the drivers that particular location is particularly bad, we will contact them directly. But I think for the two discussions that we've had recently about coordinating our efforts, identifying the top 100 locations, and then reaching out directly to the individual properties is something else we can do.
So it just struck me, having looked around, that we need to maybe have a systematic analysis of where people can arrive and depart by wheel-trans, and I don't think we've done the job on that as a system. And I'm sure it's a lot of work, but I think it's something we should be talking about. I'm going to leave it there, but it was an observation, and thanks for the answer.
Great, thank you very much. Other questions? No, last chance to speak on this item. And I'll move receipt of the CO's report. All in favor? No opposed, that carries. So we now move on to item number 2, and I believe for the last time, at least for a while, our chair. You don't have a mic there? Okay, yeah, come around then. The chair of ACAT, Mazen Aribi, is just going to introduce the ACAT minutes for us with a few, touch on a few highlights of the minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. I will start with saying, yes, this is my last briefing to you, because my term has finished for this year. So the highlights of October meeting, ACAT October 28, Mr. Josh Cole attended the October meeting, which is I consider it a very highlight, and gave kind remarks to ACAT members and their work. At that meeting, we also had the deputation from Helen Lee from TTC Rider, who would like to be an ally to ACAT to educate riders on accessibility matters. Now, as we are approaching the end of the year, I would like to say a few things. You may consider it as recommendations or summaries. Disability representative on board. We would like to see this as a standing item on the board's recommendations to the Civic Appointment Committee for the TTC board. In the absence of the accessible streetcars, we continue to propose that some of the new buses entering the system could be deployed on street routes. We know there are challenges, but we still like it to happen. We would like the board to move beyond the minimum standards when it comes to design for accessibility projects, taking into considerations growth and aging the population. Accessibility should not be an afterthought. As it is being proven time and time again, it could be very costly to the TTC down the road in the future years. Better communications and working relations when it comes to different stakeholders, such as TTC and Wheel-Trans with the city, and TTC Wheel-Trans with the Metrolinx. And that goes along with Mr. Heisey. We need a better working relationship when it's come to the TTC and Wheel-Trans and the City of Toronto. And finally, the next ACAT meeting is Thursday, December 22nd, and from 1 p.m. to 3:30 at 1900 Yonge, 7th floor, boardroom, and we hope to see some of you there. And finally, I just want to say thank you. You've been great supporter to ACAT and ACAT work, and I really enjoyed my 3-year term here. And please keep the momentum going. We have great leadership, and we have great knowledgeable members at ACAT who can work together and make Toronto proud. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well said, and thank you for that. As always, we'll thank you a bit more on the next item, but Commissioner Mihevic's going to move.
I'll move, but I'll ask a quick question. No? No? Okay.
Move receipt of the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. You're going to get me in trouble, Joe. Item number 3, which is the appointment of members to the ACAT. Maybe just before anyone speaks, I'll move the staff recommendation, which is to approve the appointment of 5 candidates to ACAT, approve the appointment of 3 candidates for the 1-year term to reestablish a pool to draw from. And number 3, which we'll do in a moment, is acknowledge and present the retiring 5 members with a mention of our appreciation. Am I allowed to say who the new people are now, or do we have to vote on that? Okay, so we'll officially welcome the 5 candidates that are recommended for the 27 ACAT membership, which are Mary Burton, Desiree-Ann McIlrick, Craig Nichol, Thomas Richardson, Lori Sue Robertson. As well, there will be 3 candidates recommended for pool membership, which are Anita Dresler, Jessica Gibbers, and Igor Samazdrik. And so welcome to those 8 new ACAT members, and thank you very much. I also want to take this opportunity to formally acknowledge, in general, the amazing work that ACAT does, and for anyone who hasn't been to a meeting, I think it's worthwhile, but much of what we debate and discuss in reports here that have that accessibility lens are brought to us from the good work of members of the ACAT community and the extended constituencies that they represent, and they always do excellent work. Obviously, we want to formally thank the departing members, and I know that they won't be going too far, but I really do want to officially thank Mr. Mazen Aribi, Ms. Karma Burkar, Ms. Marion McDonald, Ms. Bobby Moore, and Ms. Angela Ribeiro, who have been tireless advocates for riders and passengers in general, but obviously for their membership and everyone they represent. And so I just want to, again, thank you for all your work you do, and it is much appreciated by us at this table, and I hope that you continue to give your input and participate and contribute. And again, thank you so much for everything you've done. And with that, we're going to make a small presentation of our thanks, but I would hope we can just give a round of applause to those 5 members. Okay, with that, have we voted on my motion to move those recommendations? Okay, all in favor? With gratitude and congratulations. Opposed, none. That carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so that moves us to number 8, which we now have added a speaker to. And so if Nelson Wan is here, if you can come up to the podium there, and you have 5 minutes, and we'll just, if you want to make sure your microphone is on in front of you, then we're ready to go. Please go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to speak in spite of the fact that I missed the deadline for formal deputation. My name is Nelson Wong. I'm an honorary member of Manshang Foundation, and I speak on behalf of the residents who are at the long-term care facility adjacent to the proposed bus garage on McNichol, as well as the life leased residents, visitors, staff, and who are all affected by this TTC garage. You have a letter that I tabled with your secretary, and I'll just read it. And essentially, it's a letter of objection to the whole project. And I have it here to the attention of the TTC Board, the Toronto Executive Committee, the TTC Department and their consultants, the Toronto Health Department, the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change. On behalf of Manshang Foundation and their task force, I submit that this letter of objection to the TTC garage project at McNichol Avenue in Scarborough. The fundamental issues of health, peace, and safety of the Scarborough-Manshang long-term care, life lease facility, senior citizen staff, visitors have not been addressed satisfactorily. That is, the detailed findings of unacceptable air, noise, traffic conditions caused by this TTC garage, as determined by our consultants in the Manshang Foundation objection report, and submitted to the Executive Committee, have not been reviewed thoroughly and appears to be ignored. The TTC garage budget cannot and should not have been approved without a full inquiry into these basic matters. If this project is approved without due diligence given to these fundamental rights of our Scarborough-Manshang long-term care, life lease residents, staff, and visitors, any and all of the above organizations will be held liable to any and all potential damages resulting from their actions in improving of this TTC bus garage on McNichol Avenue. That is my submission, and if there's any follow-up on it in terms of design, I wish to be involved with it. Nelson Wong.
Great, thank you very much. Does anyone have questions for our presenter? No, thank you very much for coming today. We'll now move to questions of staff that commissioners may have. Commissioner Mihevc to start.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, question to the appropriate staff. How does the purchase of this particular bus garage fit into our overall bus garage strategy? Does this put us on an appropriate level, or are we still behind in the number of bus garages that we will need for the future needs of the TTC?
Through the chair, this will be the 8th TTC bus garage, and that will just, at this point, alleviate the majority of our overcrowding. Over the long term, we anticipate an additional garage will be required.
How long is the long term?
In my opinion, it would be prudent to begin thinking about the next one now.
And are we doing that?
I'll be working with our Chief Service Officer to get that going.
Okay, you know, a good way to check whether that's actually kind of in movement, is it on the federal infrastructure list?
At this time, it is not.
It's not, is that something that we should?
Because property acquisition would not be included in PTIF
Oh, I see,
funding.
yes, okay. Okay, great. Okay, so
Commissioner, if
we
it
can
helps,
anticipate.
We're mindful of that, though. We won't miss the boat on that. I mean, we've deliberately loaded our initial PTIF submission with things that we know we need now and we can get quickly, namely buses. But we are mindful that, I'd say within 10 years, we'll need another garage at the absolute maximum, and we will be very keen to include that on any PTIF submission in phase 2.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that number 8 is good, number 9 is in process. Can we look forward to something in 2017 as to the identification of a lot?
We'd have to come back to you on that, Commissioner. We are focused at the moment on McNichol, get that across the line, and then our attention turns to then what the next need will be and the best location to have that. So we'll come back to you on that.
You don't have a timeline at all?
Not as yet, but sometime in 2017, I would suggest.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, to speak? Any commissioners? Nope. I will move the staff recommendations in front of us. All in favor? Opposed? None, that carries. Thank you. Moves us to item number 9.
Was it deputation?
So there's not, the one deputation who is, you might see on your list has withdrawn. I'm sure there might be questions of staff. Just to preface those questions of staff, I will be moving a motion to refer recommendation number 4, I believe it is. So when I have the opportunity, I'll move 1, 2, and 3, which speak more to rates. And number 4, which is the endorse the approach to go out to tender for the maintenance of operations of commuter parking lots. I'm going to defer that to our next meeting. Yes. So questions of staff. Commissioner Mahavik.
Yes, thank you. Well, let me just say, I think this is a good, well-balanced report. I think you're trying to find the razor's edge between usage of lots, trying to maximize revenue, but at the same time, make sure that it doesn't negatively impact ridership that needs those lots to basically access our system. So I know the razor's edge that you're trying to walk. My question is around the 2 lots that we're looking at closing, in particular, the Downsview, 632 parking spots. Recognizing that there's a subway extension going on there, that could still be a very valuable lot. I'm not, is there a Build Toronto plan there? Is there a reason why we're looking at closing that lot, which could also be helpful?
Correct, that is.
Downsview and, oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, so, hi. So, yeah, Downsview is one of the lots that Build Toronto have identified for redevelopment.
I see, okay, so that's what's driving Wilson and Downsview?
Correct.
Right. Okay, that's really all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Other questions? I think we will have an opportunity for more questions when this comes back with what we expect will be additional information that we've requested. Okay, so I'll move items number 1 through 3 as recommended by staff, and I'll move and with that a referral of item number 4 to staff to report back to us in January, at our January board meeting. Great. All in favor of that motion? Okay, no opposed, that carries. Just a reminder for everyone, we're at kind of our bare quorum right now, so stay put. Moving on to item number 10. Transit Fare Equity Fare Pass Program. We have one presenter or deputant. Is Justin Van Det here? Oh, there he is. Welcome.
Thank you. Just ask Commissioner Mahavik to circulate these.
Thank you. Well,
That's what I do.
well, I'll start your time. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman Cole and members of the Toronto Transit Commission for allowing me the opportunity focusing on page 6, where you talk about the poverty reduction recommendations related to the
TTC. My issue is regarding the recent decision by management to remove the TTC bus schedules at major intersections in many areas across the city, and how there's definitely a segment of the population who don't own a cell phone or a data plan or have access to the internet. On October 9th, a number of service changes came into effect across the City of Toronto, including some in East York. The Woodbine 91A, for example, was also changed to the Parkview Hills 93. One would think, though, that when there was this kind of significant changes being implemented, bus schedules at major bus stops would be replaced, but that never happened. The TTC didn't even bother to post a new schedule for this route until December 8th at the subway station, which is core and essential to service delivery for transit. And what happened, and it happened when a group of residents were fed up and decided to hold a media event, which I helped organize on December 2nd. I will say that management has been very good at responding to emails, and I commend and I give full marks to Mr. Byford and his team on the responding element, but sometimes responding also means action. And I'm baffled why the...
Can I just interrupt you just for a sec? The item in front of us is the Transit Fare Equity Pass.
Yes.
Program, so if I could just kind of keep you...
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Towards
I'm
that.
just
Great.
providing some background. But sometimes I will say that I was a bit baffled by the lack of response and the action. For those on the commission who are citizen appointments, I'm sure you can appreciate the importance to effective and complete project management. You don't roll out something, a new service, a new product, while the old one continues to linger on in presence. I then learned, in getting to Commissioner and Chairman Cole's point about getting to the point, I then learned that TTC management decided to remove the bus schedules on a number of routes across the city. Riders are now encouraged to open up their app to find out when the next bus is coming. I was motivated to be here because of a 77-year-old woman who I met on Remembrance Day at the East York Civic Center. She was waiting for the 62 bus and didn't know when the next one would be coming. It was a very cold day, as I'm sure some of the elected officials who serve on the commission will remember. She said to me, if I had a phone, I would certainly know when the next bus is coming, but I don't own a cell phone. Some routes in this city run every 30 minutes. Some people have physical limitations. Some people live paycheck to paycheck and don't know or don't know when the next bus is coming because they don't own a cell phone or have access to the internet. Where is the forward and long-term thinking for the TTC to go out and purchase these new metal bus schedule holders, which many of them are at major intersections across the city, and then decide some years later we're not going to bother to use them anymore? I can just assume that these things were paid for by real dollars and cents, not monopoly money, and that they were purchased through an appropriate tender and not at a place like a Dollarama. I can assure the members of the commission that if this deputation could be heard in the evening and not downtown, far more people would be joining me here today. The better way has taken the wrong approach, and I am here before the commission to ask the commissioners to take action because management has told me that this change has happened.
Sorry,
and
I have to interrupt again.
Yes.
You haven't touched on the issue in front of us at all yet.
Okay, so
We have some issues with some other TTC business, but I just, if there's, is getting to the fare pass at all?
Well, this is something that's on page 6 of the report, which talks about the poverty reduction program.
Okay.
And I think in the poverty reduction program, you would certainly agree that people that live in poverty don't own, some of them do not own cell phones, don't have access to the internet, and if they're out lingering and waiting for public transit on a street corner where they don't have that reliable bus schedule, people are left in a very unpredictable state, not knowing when they're going to get to work, not knowing when they're going to get to school. And I think this all really relates to one another. I think that Mr. Potts, the MPP for Beaches East York, who has written a letter in support, has certainly signaled the key item in the second last paragraph where he talks about making it very, very important for the commission to make resources made available through, those that may have lack of access to resources, language skills, not being technologically savvy, being able to, or own downloading apps. I mean, I have the apps. They don't even say the new bus route number that I spoke of earlier. So I'm just trying to put something on the commissioner's table that I think is very, very important to the average citizen who relies on transit each and every day, especially those that are living on fixed incomes, those that don't own a phone. I mean, we read about it every day in the newspapers. The cost of living is going up. I think this is a very important basic service that transit riders rely on.
Great. Thank you very much. Questions for the deputant? No. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move it in for commissioners to have questions of staff. Commissioner Mihevik. I don't think there was one planned.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll ask my question.
Sorry, I just got to add, there is staff here, I believe, from City Social Development and Finance, who can also support, but our TTC staff can also answer those questions.
Yes, thank you. I asked a similar question at the council meeting last week, and I'm sure folks know on the commission who are not councilors that it passed with a very, very strong vote at council to go forward with this. My question to staff who weren't, TTC staff who were not present at the council meeting is this. The current plan has the implementation for this to be in the, I think it's March 1st or so, 2018. So full 15 months from now. And the rationale in the report was that that is how long it is going to take for Presto to be implemented. My question is given that Presto is frankly implemented within the first quarter of 2017, can that date be advanced? I think council would be perhaps supportive of that, perhaps the first quarter of January 1st, 2018, or maybe even the fourth quarter of 2017.
The functionality on Presto that will allow us to do this in an efficient way and in a way that actually works for people will be to give to give the city agency the ability to manage cards, to add a discount onto a card themselves. It's something we call e-credential. So they can actually go into the system, they can say this individual card, we're going to load this kind of concession onto it, a Fair Pass program, whatever it happens to be. That's the functionality that will allow us to manage this. That isn't ready until the end of next year. That is being developed by Presto as we speak. It'll allow us to do a number of things with the Presto card. So we are as close to the bone on how quickly we can do this as we can be. If we can do it faster, then we can look at that, but that functionality is not ready until the end of 2017. It would then take some time to test. It would take some time for the appropriate City of Toronto agencies to then go through the process.
Okay, so it's not Presto as a whole that is the worry on the implementation front. It's the software particular to discounted fares that is being developed, and you're saying it's going to take all of 2017 and the first quarter of 2017 to work it out, the beginning of 2018 to basically test it. Is that fair summary?
To test it and then to begin to actually use it, it'll take some time to transition, but yes, that's right.
Given that there's a council direction, do you see any possibility of this being facilitated earlier to allow for an earlier implementation? Is that in the realm of the real?
I don't put out very much hope into that. It is a big software change. It will help us do a bunch of things, but we won't be ready until the end of next year.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions, Vice Chair Heisey.
Mr. Upfold, so we're going to get a whole sort of package of proposals around fare concessions as part of Presto and fare integration? Is that what you're anticipating will happen in a year's time?
At the moment, we don't plan to look at changing any of our concession policies that exist right now. We are planning to roll those concession policies out on Presto, and indeed they exist now, and you can get a senior Presto card that charges the appropriate fare. We don't have any plans to do that. The ability to verify somebody's income, to then set that concession in a card is a whole different process, and for that we need this software to allow another agency to actually manage that process.
And has someone else done that? Other systems?
Done that e-credential?
The low-income concession in an electronic payment form?
Yes, I would say the majority, if not the majority of transit agents that I'm familiar with, and the report speaks to this in detail, have some sort of pass like this.
So I'll speak up for Mr. Crisanti because he's brought it up many times, the senior concession and possible changes to it. I thought we had had a discussion at some point in the recent past about looking at the concession fares, and that was kind of outstanding, that conversation. Because I know Councillor Crescendy had a number of ideas, and I just sort of feel like they're out in the ether. And I'm not saying I agree with his ideas, but if we're onto the subject of fare concessions, I was wondering when we were having a discussion about fare concessions, this is a new one, how we handle children under 12 and identification that fare concession. So how and when do we have to make a decision if we want to talk about that, or is there a decision outstanding that's going to drive a discussion on that point?
So the staff have done the work and we reported out on some of those individual measures around off-peak pricing, $1 pricing, different times of day. So we reported on the costs of that. The board decided not to move ahead with that. As it stands right now, there's no direction from the board for us to look at the concessions we have now, with the exception of our volume incentive program, which is sort of an overlay for our MetroPass discount plan, and harmonizing those two into some appropriate form.
Great. Other questions? To speak? Commissioner Mihevc?
Well, I don't want to get too far into a very good debate that we had at council, but those who watch TTC more than watch council, it would be I think of interest for everyone to note that this is very strongly and warmly received by council. This particular debate around concession fares has been frankly with us since amalgamation, and while there have been many iterations of how to do it, if to do it, really, we have not made any we never made any significant advancement on it. I think the two institutional things that happened to allow this to go forward, one was the introduction of Presto, so you actually have a control mechanism and a facilitation mechanism to allow it to happen, so checkbox there. And the second thing was that there was, rather than it being a TTC-only project, this project involved the TTC, our good staff from the city at Social Development, Finance and Administration, and staff from Public Health working together. So they were keen on the poverty reduction side of things and on the healthy community side of things, and the TTC provided the technical expertise. So those things coming together with the facilitation of that is permitted by Presto allows us really to be in the league of major transit authorities, frankly, in the world, all of whom offer a discounted fare based on ability to pay, not based on age, but based on ability to pay. So I think this is frankly part of the modernization strategy. I would view it as such, that we look at, that we have found a way to make sure that every Torontonian has at least better access to mobility in the city for jobs, for doctor's appointments, and just for general quality of life. So I think this is frankly a major breakthrough for us as a city and for us as the TTC as well. And certainly I'm thankful to the TTC staff for joining this effort and providing the technical expertise and being open to the kinds of pushes that council was directing it to do. So I'm very content with this report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other speakers? I'll just speak quickly and say that we're obviously pleased, both as wearing councillor and commissioner hats, to see this go through, and probably, as Commissioner Mihevc said, long overdue. I will recognize the obvious, though, that the TTC cannot afford to pay for this and doesn't have the funds to do so. And of course, we're thrilled that the city, as our shareholder, funder, partner, is going to step up to provide that funding. My request to everyone is that I just hope that a transit subsidy that goes from the city to the TTC is not less this amount in coming years when we are funded to provide this kind of concession. So I think it's important to note, while we all agree that it's needed, and it's something that's been talked about forever, hopefully, I would trust it would not be at the expense of the basic funding that the TTC needs and probably is short on every year anyways, if that comes from, really, which is our principal source, is the City of Toronto. So with that, I'll move the staff recommendations. All in favor? No opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Moving along. We're on item 15, and on this one, we are going to have a brief presentation. We do have a deputant first, though, two of them, actually. This is Transit Fare Inspection and Enforcement Model Update, and Alan Ewell, who I see setting up, and Miroslav Glavic, who's potentially here. Oh, there he is. So, Mr. Ewell, when you're ready, you can... Okay, go ahead. Maybe I'll ask, does Miroslav also have a presentation? Do you have audio-visual? No. Do you want to go ahead first while we... No, we don't want to wait. So can you please go ahead? Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, go for it.
I really like the idea of expanding some of the powers for our TTC special constables. I think it's important that we get our special constables, can get things moving, and not just on the TTC, but along the routes as well. The first part of this report deals with white shirts versus gray shirts. This report is on a pilot project that was from January to June of 2016. The problem I have with this report is a significant amount of ticketing for fare evasion didn't happen during this period in the report. It wasn't until July 12th that we truly allowed our TFIs to do the jobs of giving out tickets to people who are not paying on the TTC. While our TFIs is not a matter of gray shirts versus white shirts, it's a matter of badges. That's what's at issue. We're not talking about putting our special constables into white shirts instead of their current blue ones. The current special constable badge denotes a certain level of implied authority to the person for allowing the person to be there. If a guy shows up to surgery looking like this, you're not going to take him seriously because he's not just for the job he's expected to do. This report says that our white shirts are more customer friendly than gray ones. Again, it's about the badges, not the shirts. These people don't look particularly customer unfriendly to me. Customer service and friendliness in an employee comes from their attitude, not their fashion sense. We should change the acronym of TFIs to what they truly are. POOs, or Provincial Offense Officers. Please note that it's the badge that is important, not the white shirt. They issue provincial offense tickets. To reinforce the idea that it is illegal to ride the TTC without paying, one of the badges on the shoulder, front, or back should say what these people truly are. They are provincial offenses officers whose job it is to enforce bylaw number 1. This report is a well-meaning report done by an engineering and consultancy group. They may have looked at data that TTC has, but I don't think they've spent much time observing people on the streetcars. I'm on our streetcars every day. What I'm seeing is the difference between the interactions between the two different types of our fare inspectors. Group 2, where the white shirts tend to get more contempt from some of our passengers. Group 1, or the gray shirts, gets less grief from most of our passengers when they're asked for POP. The badge on the uniform clearly identifies to the customer what job these people are actually doing. We have to remember that for every POO that is out on the system enforcing our fare policy, that means one less person on the TTC to actually drive the bus or streetcar. Unless we're prepared to look at other revenue tools to pay for our enforcement teams on the TTC, it's going to remain a reality. So we have to get smarter and look for efficiencies. To make the night car more efficient for inspectors, the overnight team should move from a 2-person team to a 3-person team. The third person would drive a TTC cab. It need not be a special constable car, but any TTC car will do. 2 members of the team would get out and do fare inspections on the streetcar, while the third member would drive 3 to 4 stops ahead to pick them up once they're done. Once they're done, they go on and to find the next Blue Knight streetcar. Remember, Blue Knight streetcars are down to 30-minute headways between cars. This leaves 3 to 6 cars along the entire route in both directions. Using a 3-person team in a TTC cab would allow us to do fare inspections on every night car, every night on all 4 Blue Knight routes. Higher visibility on night routes leads to more inspections, decreased fare invasion, and more fares collected by the TTC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No. Thank you. Miroslav Glavich? Okay, I'll start your time. You have 5 minutes. Welcome.
I agree with the shirt should be more wider. It's a psychological thing. The lighter it is, the more friendly people, That's bright, nice on. But like Alan said, most people don't care about the uniform. Where's it here? Some of the training here, it says that they're receiving is support mental health. And one of the issues that transit enforcement people haven't gotten is how to deal with people with disabilities, especially hard of hearing. If I have an issue with it's called fare enforcement, and yes, you see them all the time at Main Street Station. I know Councillor Mihevich mentioned he never sees one. They love me. When I have an issue or dealing with transit enforcement, they tell you, call this number. Hard of hearing people, phones don't work. Here, page number 3 or 2, I can't read it. It's better training instead of focusing on what shirt they're wearing. Again, like Alan said, nobody cares. Transit enforcement should focus on how to deal with people with disabilities and not just mental health. They're doing a good job. One of them wished me Merry Christmas this morning, which is good. But TTC, the City of Toronto, province, and the federal government put people with disabilities, non-visual disabilities in the back, and they focus on something as stupid as the uniform. This man over here, if he wears a gray shirt, black shirt, red shirt, you're still the same person, Oops, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for our deputant? No, thanks for coming. We'll now move to a brief staff presentation to give an overview. I'm getting a look because I stressed brief. And I think Rick Leary is going to just introduce the item for us.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mark Cousins, our Chief Constable and the head of in the Enforcement Unit, will be doing the presentation. Just a little background for those who don't know Mark. He was the former Commissioner of the Police Department in Phoenix. So thank you, Mark.
Board with a TEU overview. The board wanted to speak to some fare inspection issues, so came back in February 2015, which created 6 board motions. In September of 2015, I announced the plan for how we were going to run the pilot project, and now I'm back in 2016 to give you an update. The 6 motions that were approved are before you and in your report. I know most of you remember them. The approved modified customer-friendly uniform, the mental health, the third-party oversight, the pilot project, and recruited diverse workforce and additional powers for transit enforcement officers. So when we created the uniform, we did a collaborative effort within the TTC with both customer, stakeholder, customer communications, corporate communications, and we designed the new white uniform, which is on the right on your screen. This is more of a TTC uniform as opposed to a security guard type police uniform. The mental health training was a collaborative effort by several groups to include the Ombudsman's Office, 519 Church Street, Inner City Family Health Team, and Toronto Paramedic Services. We went from zero mental health training days to 5. Those consist of 3 days of traditional mental health training, 1 day of mental health survivor training, 1 day of holistic simulation training, which incorporates mental health scenarios. The point of that effort was to get from identifying mental illness to interacting with customers suffering from mental illness. We have a new TTC program called Diversity and Inclusion, which is also helping with that, and we're currently working with Progress Place doing the survivor piece. I'd like to point out in the audience Chris Habel-Brozick, who helps us out from Progress Place. We really appreciate the efforts there. Third-party oversight is a reminder of the current process. Transit enforcement officers are special constables. They are covered through the Toronto Police Service Agreement, and as such, the Toronto Police Service have right of first refusal for any complaint that comes in on a special constable. The board was concerned about the provincial offenses officers, also known as fare inspectors, and what that that oversight would be. We looked provincially to the Toronto Police, the SIU, and the OIPRD in an attempt to see if we could find any provincial oversight. None of those have the staff or the mandate to do that oversight. We did find a model of interest out of Calgary. It's a little different in Alberta because they have a Peace Officer Act there as opposed to a Police Services Act, which we have here in Ontario. And we're still looking at that as a possibility. They created the Protective Services Oversight Committee, which was a city committee. The pilot project basically ran from January to June of 2016 for measurement purposes. We're still using the current mixed model until we were able to come before you to get some direction. What we wanted to do was look at the differences and similarities between the two groups to see if one stood out over the other as what would be an obvious choice. Group 1 was about 30% of my staff. They were dressed like police officers or security guards. Group 2 was about 70% of my staff, and they were dressed in the new customer-friendly uniform. The pilot project consisted of 6 months, 41.8 million passengers. We inspected about 3% of that, found about 2.7% fare evasion rate. The industry standards that we're searching for are an inspection rate of 4 to 5%, so we're slightly below, and an evasion rate of 2%. Most properties agree that you won't get much below 2%. We did a comparison of the white and gray shirts to determine if the evasion rate was found to be different, if something stood out. As you can see, the gray shirts found a 2.9% evasion rate, the white shirts at 2.64. Very close, certainly not a smoking gun that would point out one over the other. We also took a look at productivity. Did one group produce more than the other group? And what we've done here is we've laid down the production of each of the white shirt and gray shirt transit fare inspectors, and as you can see, the red line indicates the average, and it's very close to being the same. We took a look at assaults and threats. Was one group more likely to be assaulted or threatened than the other group? And as you can see, when we first looked at it, we said, okay, 15 per million chance for a white shirt, 3 per million chance for a gray shirt. That's a pretty low number either way, standalone. But when we compared them to each other, we saw that 1 and 13 kind of stood out to us, so we wanted to dig a little deeper. So when we took a look at those 13, we found, as you can see in the right column there, 5 happened in January, 1 in February, 3 in March. That's 9 of the 13 happened in the first 3 months of the program. We dug a little deeper, and what we found out was that the fare inspectors were learning their role and the customers were learning their rules of engagement. And what was happening was, while assaults were occurring that by the book and by the letter of the law count as assaults, we found out that it was really more of a interaction issue. So for example, a fare inspector might put up their hands to say, we're doing a proof of payment inspection. Someone would bump their arm. Is that an assault? We counted it as an assault for this pilot project, but in all these assaults, no one was injured, no one lost time from work. And as you can see, they've started to drop off, and there's only been a couple in the last few months for the entire group. We took a look at complaints. Is one group more likely to get complaints than another group? And as you can see, it's a 31 per million or 34 per million inspections complaint ratio, so very close. The TTC Budget Committee requested a projection on what we think would happen if we added 100 fare inspectors. We've said all along that we're going to stop at 80 and reassess. Remember, this program is in its infancy. It's only 1 year old. I think we're doing pretty well in terms of inspection and evasion rates just 1 year in. So we want to hold at 80, be smart before we add more staff and see if we need it. So what we did here is we took the current TFIs that we had on the ground, we took their productivity and we extrapolated out. If you added 20 more and they did exactly the same level of productivity, what would happen? And so you can see in the left column there, the change from the current level. The right column indicates the total. We anticipate that the 20 that have just come out of training and hit the street will most likely, if they have the same productivity, would raise the inspection rate to 3.8, so we're getting close to that industry standard, and would decrease the evasion rate to 2.5%, so we're getting close to that 2% industry standard. When you project out to the 100, you see that it becomes 5.1 and 1.9. The delta for the fare box revenue increase is $600,000 for the 20 we added and $1.3 million if we added 20 additional. We figure it costs about $100,000 per, so it's $2 million to chase $600,000. So we think stopping at 80 is a good move for now. We did a customer survey before and after the pilot project to see if either of the uniforms or the models affected the way customers perceived fare inspection. And what we were happy to find is that the numbers in the areas we cared about went up. So identification has improved. People didn't know who the gray shirts were. Were they security guards? Were they police? Who were they? But 79% of people now know when they see that white shirt, that's a fare inspector. Perception has improved. 71% are now satisfied with the uniform. Interaction has improved. 91% of all people feel that, or that people that were surveyed feel that the interaction with a fare inspector was quick and easy. The takeaway from the survey was basically that the gray was an authoritative uniform, but that the white uniform had friendliness and a perception of safety. People actually felt safer with the white uniform than they did the gray one. For the diversity motion, we just wanted to point out that our original gray shirt recruitment, we had 11% female, 28% visible minority. And when we did the new white shirt recruitment, we had 16% female, 47% visible minority. We'll continue to work on our outreach for females. That number, that low number for females is based on how many actually apply. We didn't fail a lot of females, and that's why the number's at 16%. We just don't have that many applying, and we're going to work hard to fix that problem. We responded to Commissioner Heisey's request for additional powers and authorities. The question before us was, why can't you direct traffic or tow and tag cars? So we worked with the Toronto Police Service very closely, and we have approval from them to go to their Toronto Police Services Board in January, and then in Q1, the Ministry for Limited Highway Traffic Act authorities. So we'll be able to direct traffic, people who are blocking streetcars. We'll be able to go to closures and system interruptions. We have closures a lot throughout the year, every weekend almost, and we know that the Toronto Police Service can only fill about 50% of the pay duties for that. So we'll put our fate back in our own hands by being able to send a special constable to that location. Parking and towing, we're asking the board to amend the Toronto Municipal Code so that we can have the ability to go anywhere along a service alignment and move cars or ticket cars that are parked illegally that are affecting service. We're proposing a new enforcement model to have a multifunctional special constable, a uniform presence where needed. Some people feel that the customer-friendly uniform may have some folks who will not voluntarily comply like we'd like them to for proof of payment. And so if we become aware of a location or a line that has a lot of issues where we think we need to bring more power and authority to that location, we can bring a special constable over there. We'd like to start doing some undercover fare inspection. We know that people are waiting to see fare inspectors and then tapping their Presto cards. We know that people are signaling other people about where people are. So we'd like to put a special constable on streetcars to just see who's paid and who hasn't paid. It's an observation undercover, and when the fare inspectors get on, we simply say, that person didn't pay, we've watched them for 3 stops, and they just tapped their Presto card. That's fare evasion. The efficient movement of traffic and the tag and tow to improve service from the Highway Traffic Act stuff. So the recommendations are approve the modified customer-friendly uniform with no baton or handcuffs for fare inspectors, direct staff to continue to search for third-party oversight, direct staff to report back to the board on efforts at recruitment outreach to attract a diverse workforce, seek an amendment to Chapter 150, Article 4 of the Toronto Municipal Code for tagging and towing of vehicles, endorse enhanced authorities approved by the Toronto Police and the Ministry under the HTA, and direct staff to report back to the board when meaningful data is available regarding Presto inspections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions beginning with Commissioner De Laurentiis?
This is really a question of clarification in terms of what does third-party oversight refer to? Is it with respect to the, if someone has a complaint against an officer and so creating a framework for those complaints, or does it speak to the roles of the inspectors? Just help me understand.
Yeah, so the third-party oversight really came out of the idea that fare inspectors were going to have batons and handcuffs, and unlike the special constables who also have baton and handcuffs, the only oversight available to the fare inspector is the TTC. So we have a human resources unit complaint coordinator who's trained by TPS to intake complaints, but the concern by several individuals was that we're kind of policing ourselves, as it were. Now that we've asked the board for permission to remove the batons and handcuff, third-party oversight may no longer be an issue for fare inspectors, and we'll always have the oversight for special constables because of the agreement. So go ahead.
And just a follow-up question. So if I'm a rider and I have a complaint against an inspector, who do I go to? Is that where the ombudsman?
So you would call the TTC complaint line if you have a complaint?
Okay, so that's.
And we would take that. The concern was if you had a use of force type complaint, if we used a baton or handcuffs on you, what would the oversight look like? And of course, any crime that's alleged, whether it's against a special constable or a fare inspector, would be investigated by the Toronto Police, not us.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mihevc.
Yes. This is kind of an amazing report in that intuitively, one might think this would have gone in the other direction. What I'm wondering, has this report been kind of looked at in comparison, contrast to international or even national debates around police enforcement, security guard enforcement, or customer service kinds of issues? I can see this kind of conversation happening from everywhere, from bars to entrances to City Hall to all kinds of places where people gather. Is there any literature out there that supports the kinds of insights that you've developed here, that you're aware of?
Well, I think we're writing some of that literature as we go through this evolution. When we looked internationally, North America, almost every model out there exists. So you've got people who inspect fares and then sell fares at the same time. You've got people who are police officers carrying guns inspecting fares, and everywhere on the spectrum. And what we found is that it really is a local cultural issue as to where you fall on the enforcement or inspection spectrum for that. And so what we always look at is proportionality. So what are we bringing to the table, and how does it match what our end game is? And so for $3.25, which adds up over time, obviously, for $3.25, do we need these tools? Do we need authoritative uniforms? Do we need more tools, less tools? When we look at all that, we look at all the data, and I think the biggest piece of the data is that customers feel better engaging with fare inspectors dressed in the new uniform without the tools, and we're still getting the job done only 1 year in, almost to those industry standards already. And you think of other properties like San Francisco that's at 8% fare evasion and happy to finally be there. I think we're starting at a whole different place than a lot of properties do. We'll continue to monitor this, look for trends, and of course, we'd always come back to the board if we found out, it's not working anymore. We need to make some more changes.
Right, so it's a work in progress, and we might have a Toronto case that might be different than a San Francisco case, might be different than a London case, or an Amsterdam case, or what?
Right, so we're the third largest transit system in North America, and I can tell you that the Los Angeles transit system has hundreds of transit police on it. But we don't see a need for having hundreds of transit police on the TTC, even though we're bigger than LA. So that's what I mean by it's really a local issue. You can look for best practices throughout, and there are some basic standards, but each property, I think, has to find where they fall on that spectrum of how much enforcement and inspection you need.
Last question, is there a pattern that you might be aware of, recognizing that Canada is a little bit like the U.S., we have some eyes that go southwards and we have eyes that go towards Europe. So we're kind of a bit of a, a bit of a this and that. Best practices or what the pattern is in Europe.
Well, I think as you look south, it becomes more enforcement oriented, and I think as you look towards Europe, it becomes more customer service oriented. And remember, this is just one piece in our total toolbox. You know, if all you have is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. So we want to have more things available to us. We think this fits perfectly for the fair inspection piece, knowing that we can reach out to special constables, reach out to the Toronto Police Service if we need to. And I think this is a nice addition to the TTC.
Great. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you. Questions from Commissioner Crisanti and then Vice Chair Heisey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just want to ask this question again. I asked it last time and maybe the time before that. What is our total revenue loss on when it comes to fair evasion? I believe you answered that question for me last time, Chris. Could you tell us what it is? Our total estimated loss of revenue when it comes to fair evasion?
So the overall fair evasion rate, we think is somewhere between 2% and 3%, and against our revenues, we think that is probably around $20 million a year.
Oh, it's a pretty serious problem still. Like $20 million a year is quite significant.
So I think in the context of the amount of money we take in, and if you think about fair evasion as shoplifting, I think that most shops, most retail agencies would be very, very pleased to have a 2.5% loss due to shoplifting.
Okay. So in terms of the change of uniform from gray to white, so the overall analysis is that the white uniform is more acceptable, works better than the gray. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah.
What's more effective here at the end of the day?
Well, so effectiveness can be measured in a couple of different categories. When we took a look at the evasion rate that was found on the lines that were worked by the whites versus the gray shirts, the evasion rate was slightly lower for the white shirts. That was a 6-month pilot. I wouldn't hang my hat on that being 100% accurate, but it's the best we could do in the 6 months that we ran the pilot. The customers, we know, prefer the white shirt. The customers interact and react better to the white shirts. And overall, we think that the effectiveness of being at, right now, about 3% on streetcar for a fair evasion rate, only 1 year in, and still working with 2 different models, we think we're very close to being where we are. Remember, that proportionality thing always comes into play. You don't want to bring more to the table than you need to. So if I don't need an authoritative uniform and I don't need tools, then I don't want an authoritative uniform or tools. And I'm seeing, based on the data that I've seen and based on the information that I've seen coming up on a year in the program, that is my recommendation to the board to approve that, and that's all we need at this point.
Okay, what is the cost of transitioning from the white, from the gray to the white?
I think it's about $2,000. We just got to buy some white shirts for the gray shirts, and then
it's a nominal. It's not a massive.
Yeah, it's nominal.
Not a massive cost. Yeah. All right. So, all right. I just, we seem to be spending a whole lot of time on this. So currently, we're at how many fair inspectors do we have? Let's talk about people.
We have about 68 right now, boots on the ground.
Fair inspectors. And special constables?
41 boots on the ground.
And so what is the sort of plan over the next couple of years? Where do you want to, you mentioned 100 fair inspectors earlier. Is that your vision, your goal, that we should be at 100
No,
in the next couple of years?
We just offered up the projection on the 100 because of the TTC Budget Committee ask. We want to stay at 80 and review this as it goes. If we get a decision today from the board, we will now know exactly what everybody's going to look like, exactly what everybody's mandate's going to be, and we can start really settling in. And I say we stay at 80 for now. Now, if you want to go proof of payment system-wide, that's a different conversation. Remember, we're just talking proof of payment 11 streetcar lines. So 80 is okay for there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still concerned about that $20 million, even though I heard that it's, overall, it's within the averages. There's a lot of service we can provide for even half that much, but, so that's a different topic. But just want to know, what impact has the whole TPS modernization had on the, on TPS presence in the system? And what are we doing to mitigate some of that with our own special constables?
Right. So the Toronto Police Service transformational report made a recommendation that has not been finalized yet. I believe it'll be finalized in January, that the Transit Patrol Unit should be disbanded because we have created a highly capable special constable service at the TTC. Some of those resources may have been deployed elsewhere in the city. I would prefer that the Toronto Police answer that deployment question. But what we're doing to mitigate it is we're working with the Toronto Police Service to determine what our cap or our authorized strength should be at this point. And so we're currently putting a business case together based on a lot of information, kilometers we have to cover, calls for service, things of that, to come up with a cap. And once we come up with a cap and it's approved by the Toronto Police Services Board, then we'll know where we are, what we can work to from a cap, and then each year we'll add a little bit. So for example, as we talked about, I've asked for 8 special constables next year. That's 10% of the 80 Toronto police officers that were in the TPU, assigned to the TPU. So we think starting with that and keeping a monitor on how calls for service increase or decrease is the most reasonable way to go.
And currently, there are no, TPS is not in the system at all, 100%?
Well, the Toronto Police Service will always respond from a divisional perspective. Again, I don't want to speak on behalf of TPS as to where they deploy people on a daily basis.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Heisey has questions?
I was interested in your anticipated timing on obtaining amendments to the municipal code for tagging and towing of vehicles. Do you have a time frame for that?
My understanding is it goes through the city clerk's office, and I'm not aware on how long that would take.
Okay.
I think it goes to the clerk and then council and then through.
The next question I had was, one of the major problems I see on the streets as I go around is blocked intersections. And this isn't going to get at that, right?
Yeah, we'll be able to respond to blocked intersections if
someone's moving, they're in an intersection, they're blocking traffic the other direction, what role would we have with these powers?
So we could go out there and tell them to move their vehicle. We could go direct traffic. We could stop traffic and have traffic go against a red.
Oh, I see.
We could, yeah.
So we couldn't give them a ticket, but we could instruct them not to enter the intersection.
That's correct.
Oh, that's useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we know every day these streetcars are trapped by illegal left turners.
Happens all the time.
Between 8 and 10.
Yep.
Then we can send somebody out between 8 and 10 and make sure that doesn't happen.
What happens if they don't comply with the direction?
Well, technically speaking, they're in violation of the Highway Traffic Act, but we are not going to be making traffic stops or issuing tickets. So what we would probably do at that point is reach out to our partners at the Toronto Police Service and say, can you come assist us at least for a period of time so that everybody understands that a ticket could be issued?
Okay. If we wanted to have the power to give that ticket, that's another level of power we haven't contemplated.
Yeah, and
what would that be?
Well, based on my experience, I'm not a fan of pulling over vehicles without having police constable authorities and tools. So I wouldn't want to be engaging with vehicles to that level.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? I just have one question in kind of the one of the appendices about comparison of fare violation by line. Putting aside the gray shirt, white shirt split for a moment, my rough math looks like in the time period studied, you've done somewhere around the lines of 600,000 inspections on Harbourfront and Spadina, which is, I would say, about 3 times more than Queen and King combined. Knowing kind of what we hear anecdotally all the time and where the pressure is that on those lines, is there not value in redeploying and kind of prioritizing where we're doing inspections and to do them on lines that are really busy, where there's more potential for fare loss than the ones that it seems like we're dedicating our resources?
Right, so we're still trying to find the sweet spot for where we're going to deploy on a daily basis. Some of this stuff, when we started out, the big numbers are Spadina. It's easy to get big numbers on Spadina. And so from a number standpoint, there was a lot of push sort of towards that. We look at those numbers weekly, and my supervisor, Nick Milhoman's in the corner here, he weekly redeploys people. So as we sort of settle into this system, and we've even changed schedules, I think 5 times for fare inspectors to try to figure out when the best times to be out there would be. We definitely look at that, Mr. Chair, and we're always considering which place should we put our limited resources.
And to your point, are the numbers so high for Spadina and Harborfront because there are those pinch points where an inspector can stand and, as 2 vehicles unload, that many hundreds of people just walk by them?
That's correct. So we try to have a mix of onboard and off-board inspections, but when we do off-board inspections, to your point, that pinch point, we can get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of inspection. In the same time, it would take us a lot longer to walk, and especially if streetcars are too crowded, we can't walk them anyway.
And I'm
So
guessing
absolutely, that's why we've got those locations there.
kind of more legacy traditional routes like Queen, King, Dundas, and even Carlton don't provide that same kind of spot where you kind of like a fishing hole for giving speeding tickets.
Yeah, those streetcars are crowded during rush hour, and it would be difficult to do onboard inspections for those. I think the undercover piece might help with that, just to be able to view and then have fare inspectors at another location meet up to say these are the people that didn't pay, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you very much. To speak, Commissioner Mahavik.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to move the recommendations. I really appreciate our folks in fair inspection and enforcement coming up with this report. I didn't think it would go this way, but you know what? You followed the evidence, and the evidence led you to a very rational, good conclusion, and I think it's the right one. I also think that if this is accurate in the Toronto case, it is something that maybe security guards in our post-secondary institutions, in the variety of institutions that use security guards, maybe there's a little lesson here on the Canadian way, which is that if you look like you are friendly and customer-oriented, that you have a better relationship with your client, your patient, your customer, whatever, than if you're kind of looking like you're bringing in the Marines. And maybe that's the Toronto case, I don't know, but maybe there's a little lesson here in human behavior and how to spiral situations down to a calm interaction when there might be a conflict, rather than spiraling them up with muscle and brawn when it is perhaps not necessary. So that's the kind of human lesson I take from this good report.
So with that, Commissioner Mahavik has moved the staff recommendations. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Next is item number 16.
Chair, sorry, I forgot one. Can I ask one little question here?
Sure.
Because it is important. I'm wearing my public health hat, and I forgot to ask this, and it might be something that's
Motion to
important.
reopen the item by Chair Cole. All in favor? That
I really
carries.
apologize for this. So there is right now a crisis around overdose in Toronto. And so my question to staff here is, are you part of the conversation related to the carrying of naloxone by our fare inspectors and by our security officers with public health? There was a good report. I think Vancouver's doing it. I think I know there was a report there on them doing it, and I'm wondering where the status is of that, and whether that might be something that we should consider.
Yeah, certainly something we could consider. We're currently not in conversations with it. We have not seen from our calls for service level that issue that you've just brought up, but it's certainly something we want to keep an eye on, and we'll certainly consider becoming part of the conversation.
Okay, so that's coming up with the Board of Health, with the Health Unit in January, because that crisis that has now hit the West Coast is actually kind of moving to Toronto, and it would be very good for this. There's this kind of good drug out there called Naloxone, and you apply it, and it very quickly stabilizes a person who has overdosed. So it's something to, I will move a motion, but I think it should be out there, frankly.
Great, thank you. So a motion to approve those recommendations again, all in favor? Okay, that carries. We're now on to item 16, Presto implementation. We have a deputant, Michael Rosenberg. Oh, I see him over there. Welcome. Go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. So just 2 points. One on the general concept and another on the single-use fare. So just in general, I just think that you should be aware of the fact that technology is not automatically convenient. I mean, you shouldn't just automatically put words like technology, modernization, and convenience all in the same sentence just because they somehow belong there. You're clearly seeing that there are a lot of problems with this kind of a system. I don't think they're all going to go away. I don't really know what's going to happen in the long term in the sense of people just not necessarily always knowing whether or not they have a fare on their card, whether or not the machines have accidentally charged them twice, or who knows what. Like, I don't know that this system is ever going to be as reliable as a simple token. And I don't know what your long-term situation is, but you have to realize that it's just not true that technology is automatically convenient. It just isn't something you can just take for granted that that's the case and just sort of rely on assumptions about modernization. I think you're always going to have a situation where, in terms of the use of these kinds of cards, it's great for people who have a very predictable use of the system, and it's not great for people who don't know where their next fare is coming from, and they might have just gotten a fare from somebody, or they don't know on any given day whether they're paying cash or token or whatever. So I think there's basically just a significant portion of your users who are just plain better served by a physical token system or something of that sort. Now, if you're going to go for some kind of electronic single-use fare, which seems to be the plan, then I think there are certain considerations you have to take in doing that. One is that it is simply not good enough to use those single-use fares for the purposes you've essentially already seem to be intending them for. You seem to say that they are only for social service agencies and or possibly as a means to pay a cash fare. That's not sufficient. The kinds of people I'm talking about, which could be 20, 30% of your total customer base who regularly give tokens to each other for a whole variety of reasons, not all of which are related to low income. For those types of people, you need to continue to have a single-use fare that can be purchased at the token price, or essentially what will now be the $3 price. I mean, this is my prop for today, the role of tokens. I have groups that I give these out to. I go through really almost 2 full ones of these per week, like lots of them. That's not going to be done with Presto cards, and I'm not a social service agency. So these need to be available to either small groups like the kinds of groups I'm associated with, or to businesses that give them to their customers. I mean, if you look at this, this costs more than a Metro Pass. So you can pretty well assume that anybody who buys one of these is giving them to multiple people. If they were buying them for themselves, they would buy a Metro Pass. So you know that lots of people transfer fares, and they're not all social service agencies. So you've got to continue to sell whatever the new single-use fare system is. I have to be able to go, I guess they won't fit in a roll, it'll probably be a small box. I have to be able to go in and buy 50 of them and pay $150 and not a penny more for it. I'm not asking for a discount. I'm just asking not to see my costs increase to the cash fare rate when I give out so many of these, and I'm like a major TTC customer all by myself, like talking thousands of dollars. I just want to continue to be able to pay $3 for a transferable fare. And there are many businesses and groups and associations that give out fares to employees, customers, members, etc. It's not just for social service agencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? I guess I have one question. Are you adverse to having a stack of 10 one-time use cards as opposed to a roll of 10 tokens?
Well, first of all, I'm like in the thousands if you look at how many I actually use. But as long as it can be purchased by anybody, and I purchase 10 of them or 50 of them or whatever, and I'm paying the $3 rate, not the $3.25 rate. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks for your time. We have, I guess we'll now move to our presentation from staff on this item. You should have a copy in front of you, and we'll hand it over to our deputy.
Are you going to start my timer?
I'm starting your timer. Just so we know.
So it just felt like an appropriate time, since so much has changed with Presto and is such a transformative project for the TDC, both from a business perspective but our customer perspective, to come back and give an update on where we are and what we've achieved in the last year, but also what our plans are for next year. And as a reminder, what Presto is, it is a system that we have a contract with Metrolinx, and it is a managed service. So we pay them 5.25% of the money that is spent on the TTC, and they provide us for all the service. They install it, they design it, all the equipment is theirs, and at full implementation, our overall costs should be at or less than what they are today. So this is a managed service. We are the customer of Metrolinx for them providing this service to us. How it works, effectively, you get a plastic near-field communication card. You buy that for $6 as it stands right now. When you're boarding, coming in through a TTC subway station or getting onto a vehicle, you tap it, and the fare is deducted from that card onto which you've put money. When it's fully implemented, Presto will replace all of the legacy fare media we have now. Everything that we use today, tickets, tokens, paper passes, plastic passes, weekly plastic passes, Downtown Express stickers that go onto a plastic pass, all of those things go away, and your Presto card becomes a holder for any kind of fare that you want to use. In terms of buying a Presto card, right now you can get that online and they'll mail it to you. You can get it at 15 gateway newsstands, which are in the TTC system, by telephone at the TTC Customer Service Center, or at other GO stations for Union, for example, or in Durham, you can go to the Durham Town Hall and you can get a Presto card there. I'll come on to plans that we have to expand that and make sure that it is even easier to get a Presto card. So what's happened in 2016? Well, we have, as of tomorrow, we will have Presto at every single subway station. So you'll be able to get in at least one entrance at every one of our subway stations. All 1,900 buses now have Presto installed. So you can use it now at every one of our buses. In 2015, we rolled out to streetcars, so actually we've been able to use Presto on all streetcars for the last year or so. And Wheel-Trans, as of yesterday, on all of our TTC Wheel-Trans vehicles and our accessible taxis also all now have a mobile Presto reader on them, so a Wheel-Trans customer can use Presto. The exception to that is on our sedan contract. So we have a contract with companies like Beck or a sedan regular taxi company that provides that service. We are still looking for a solution on how we can address that issue, because it is not feasible for us to provide 1,900 or 2,000 of these mobile devices to those vehicles who may only take one fare over the course of a year. So all of that, and I say, touching on the fact that this is transformative and it does change almost every interaction our customers have with us, it certainly hasn't been without its challenge over the last year. And primarily our customers have felt that in reliability. And primarily that has happened in a number of spots. That middle one is maybe the one I'll start with, which is our new fare gates. These have the ability, and they are already beginning, to transform our stations in the way we manage flows through our stations, because we can set these gates up so that at AM rush, they are letting people in. At PM rush, they are letting people out. We can manage our flows. We can get real-time information on how they are working. We can get real-time information actually on fare evasion from these gates. But where we have struggled is actually in terms of the reliability when customers push on them. And I'm certainly not blaming customers, because for the last 60 years, we have been teaching our customers to drop a token into a gate or swipe a MitraPass through it, and then you push through the turnstile. The last thing you want to do with a gate like this is push through it. And so customers are getting accustomed to having to do something different, to tap a card and wait for the gates to open rather than try and push through them. We actually did a maintenance release last week that means that gates, when customers do push on them, they don't go out of service as easily, but that is primarily the area we have found our reliability problems with the gates. On that self-serve reload machine, which you see on the right there, it has undoubtedly been a problematic device for lots of different reasons, down from the communication system in them. We put about 60 of these into the TTC network before Pan Am Games to make sure that we could begin to use them. They were really solid in the laboratory testing. They were pretty solid for a number of months until the vendor Scheiten Bachmann. And again, these are devices that are owned and operated by Presto. They just happen to be on our stations. They were really solid until we had to make some changes to our payment card industry compliance, some software in there, and that's where we began to get challenges. We will be replacing Presto/Metrolinx. We'll be upgrading these machines next year or replacing them if they can't get them to the reliability. But there's no doubt that they have been a problematic machine. And on the left there is the device that you use on vehicles. That's the device that you tap on when you get onto a streetcar and bus. And these have had failure rates above and beyond what we would like as well. Our contract with Presto for a device like this is 99.99% availability. So we have very, very strong availability targets. It is a new system that we're rolling out. This is different, although it has the same the physical appearance as, say, what happened in Ottawa. It's actually different software and a different device that's running on this. So we are field testing these. We are troubleshooting them. We are beginning to get the failure rate of these down. And part of this challenge has been is undertaking this work at the same time as customers are beginning to use it. So in most transit agency, when they roll out a smart card, nobody has a smart card in their pocket until they've put all the devices in and they've spent a year or two testing it. When we are doing this, we already had a couple of million people in the 905 or even on the TDC that already had that card in their pocket. So we made the judgment that actually to not let customers use that facility for 1 or 2 years while we complete our rollout was actually a negative thing for them. And as I say, the reliability of all of these machines, we are improving on a day-to-day basis, and we are improving the errors. And the final part of that is our contract with Metrolinx does protect us from revenue loss in the circumstance where a customer gets on and can't pay. There are a number of mechanisms for us to do that, but the contract protects us from that possibility. But the main message that we have talked about to many of our customers is, again, this is very much a beta. This is still a work in process and in progress, and Presto at the moment is not right for many of our customers. It just isn't. And it will begin to get more and more right over the next year, but right now there are lots of products that we sell that it doesn't make sense for a customer to use. So what's coming up in the next year, really, around the infrastructure, this ongoing rollout of our fare gates. So we are now at around a little more than 50 stations have the fare gates. If you remember, there were 26 stations we did before the Pan Am Games where we simply stuck a Presto reader on the front of a new turnstile. We'll be going back to those stations this year to replace all of those gates with turnstiles. Most of those stations only have 1 or 2 gates that are enabled, fare turnstiles that are enabled. In 2017, we're getting very close with Presto and Metrolinx to inking a deal with a third-party retailer. So this will be a broad selection of locations that customers can go to across the city to add money to their Presto card, to buy a Presto card, to get a concession set on their Presto card, and to make sure that there is actually a physical presence and a good physical presence in the same way we have our third-party retail network now. But there is somewhere that somebody can go to if suddenly they realize that they are going to get on a bus, they failed for whatever reason to add that money online, that there's somewhere that they can go to add that value onto their card. As I mentioned, those self-serve reload machines, we'll be replacing those. Prestos will be replacing those next year with a machine with more memory in it, with a greater communications network, so getting those more reliable. A new fare media vending device will begin to be installed at our stations. So if you think of a self-serve reload machine, it really has one function. It's to take a debit or credit card and add money or a product onto your card. It doesn't vend you a Presto card. It doesn't vend you a paper cardboard Presto card that I can onto our limited use media. The new fare media vending device is the all singing, all dancing machine that lets you do all those things in our subway stations. It will let you go into a subway station, purchase a Presto card, add value onto it, do all the things that currently happen right now in our collector booth. When we open the TYSSE at the end of next year, it will be fully Presto enabled and there will not be operating collector booths in those stations. We have made the decision a number of years ago that we are going to go on these brand new stations to not have a spot where you can go and buy fare media from a collector. The gates will be in, the fare media vending devices will be in, the add value machines will be in, so these will truly be a hallmark of what's happening. And equally over the next year, we're really going to have to begin to work on what that solution is for that Wheel-Trans sedan taxi. Those 1,900 or 2,000 taxis that we use to provide a service to our customers, and what actually is that exact solution that we can come up with with Presto. So, moving away from the infrastructure, what is going to happen over 2017 in terms of what we do now and what is going to change? So in 2017, and we are actually running some campaigns and information to our customers right now, we will continue to sell tickets and tokens and the passes they have now. For that very reason that I talked about before, we are not quite ready yet. We do not have the functionality yet that will let us start to pull out of that. But at the end of 2017, that is when we will stop selling that legacy fare media. We will have to continue to accept much of that media in 2018. There are 20 million tokens out there. We will come up with ways next year to start to restrict those sales, to start to get people to use them. But at the end of 2017, there are still going to be a lot of people with tokens in their pockets, and we've got to allow some time and have a strategy to get people to use those tokens over the course of 2018. The introduction of the TTC Pass products on Presto will happen this year, and specifically allowing somebody to add a monthly pass onto their Presto card. Concessions for youth, students, post-secondary, some of these exist already, but we're changing the way that that concession is allowed and is set, and actually will begin to be able to say to people, okay, Presto is probably right for you now. That big change, this big transition happens in 2017 when we can truly say the infrastructure is sound, the machines are working, we have the availability, you can now get the product that you want on Presto card. Now is the time for you to make the switch. CNIB and support persons, Presto on buses in York Region, of course, are downtown expresses. So what does that mean for all these different products in the future? And this is a few slides here to sort of show how things work today and what the end state will be. So for a cash user, for example, you will still be able to go into a subway station or go to one of those third-party retailers I talked about and use that cash, either by adding it onto a Presto card that you have or purchasing a paper Presto card, which will be the limited use media, or additionally, open payment, which is using your credit card, will begin to be allowed at the end of next year as well. So you won't actually even have to, if you're a cash user, you won't have to get a Presto card, you won't have to go to a Fairvita vending device. You'll be able to tap your credit card on the Presto reader and it will take that fare. So if you're a cash user now, the end state is that actually you can go to one of these services, but equally you can just use your credit card or you can just use your payment-enabled phone as an example. A token will become a pay-as-you-go on a Presto card. So somebody will have money on their Presto card, they will tap, and we will take that amount off their Presto card. Tickets, effectively the same, but they will be for students and seniors. There will be an integrated photo ID on that Presto card. So how we set that concession, and if you remember, the board approved this concept of us moving to both proving eligibility at time of use, which is what we do now. We also want to move to proving eligibility at the time you have your concession set. It is another way to provide valuable oversight and make sure that we protect the concessions to make sure that the right people are using the right concession. On child, which is free, ages 6 to 12, children will have a Presto card at that age, primarily because in order to get, there are lots of 10 and 11-year-old that use the TTC independently. They need to be able to get through the fare gates that are ours are stations, so they will have to have a Presto card to let them to do that. And for the ages 10 to 12, we'll be looking at an integrated photo ID again to make sure that the circumstances we have now where it's difficult to tell a 10, 11, or 12-year-old who travels for free separate from a 13, 14, or 15-year-old pays a fare, we'll have to wrap some concession policies around that. Metro passes, senior Metro passes, weekly passes, all of these pass products will simply be something that you can either buy at the start of the month, where you can just load that pass product that you have always done onto your Presto card, either at a machine, online, at one of these third-party retailers I was talking about. But we're also looking at the concept of a loyalty scheme, which some people would be familiar with on other transit agencies, including Go, which constitutes something along the lines of you pay your cash fare for your first 20 trips, you pay a discounted rate for the next 20 trips, and after a certain stage it becomes free. So really what that lets people do is it gives what we in transit call them perfect foresight. They don't need to make a decision at the beginning of the month or the beginning of the week or the beginning of the day, how much travel am I going to use and does it make commercial sense from my pocketbook perspective to buy that product. As a transit agency, we can simply say, travel, we've got your back, we'll make sure that you are never charged more than what your perfect purchase would have been if you had made that decision at the beginning of the day. The day pass will also be in there, and that end state, those bulk tickets and tokens, which are really recommend for social agencies in school, will either become a Presto pay-as-you-go or that paper Presto card, a cardboard Presto card. And to that point there, what I talked about before in terms of the low fare income pass around the e-credentials, that will also allow us to allow customers, that solution will let us allow customers to add value onto somebody else's Presto card. So if somebody has a Presto card and I want to give them a single trip, I can go online and I will be able to add that value onto the Presto card that they have already. So there are a number of solutions that we can use that will solve both our issues for social agencies and schools, but also those circumstances where an individual perhaps wants to gift a single trip to somebody. And the Downtown Express sticker is equally will simply be recognized within the system, so the Presto system will take the appropriate fare and somebody will travel. So we have been communicating this for the last year, 2 years. There is no doubt that communications is part of the critical success here, explaining to customers, especially during this difficult transition time. And there's no doubt it is different because we're trying to teach people new habits. We're trying to teach people to do something different. And ultimately, that will be much, much easier because what I talked about in that sort of perfect knowledge, they will just travel and they will trust the TTC to take the appropriate fare. Right now, we're taking them through a transition of they have to make some different choices. In terms of Presto updates, Ambassador, subway stations, we are doing everything we can to handhold our customers through this period. And that really brings me to the end. As I say, this is, to my mind, and not just because I'm so involved on a day-to-day basis in helping deliver and scope this, along with great members of my team. This truly is a transformative project from a business perspective, and allow us to modernize how we recognize revenue, from a business perspective of understanding exactly where our ridership is, where it is at different times of the day, how people move through our system, from a customer perspective of being able to have a single card that works right across the GTHA in Ottawa, to have a single card that gives them the flexibility to travel the way they want to travel, and to let us give our customers that promise, that price promise of, you don't need to plan in advance how you're going to travel. Have money on your card, make sure you set up for auto reload, and then you can travel in the best way possible. It really is transformative.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a bunch of questions. We'll start with Commissioner De Laurentiis, Mihevc, then Lalonde.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying that I've received lots of unsolicited comments about how much people love their Presto cards, so pat on the back. I'll start with that. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, TTC is the largest user, the most important customer that Metrolinx has. So the question is, to what extent, given that we're going to have the experiences and most of the experiences before anybody else, to what extent are we part of the Metrolinx, say, governance or committee structure to address issues like reliability, functionality, and so on? What does that look like? Are we satisfied with the arrangement we have in that regard, given, and I would say that, we're paying a good, solid price to Metrolinx.
There are two answers to that. One is in the formal governance section, in terms of I sit on the executive client committee with the other GMs of the transit agencies, be that GO or Durham Regional Transit. So we have a quarterly or more often meeting where we work through those issues, we come to solutions. But more importantly, we have a contractual relationship with them. So there is equally, and that contractual relationship is very different than the contractual relationship that all the other agencies have. And I can take you through that in some detail at some stage if you like, but they need to fulfill the business requirements that are in the contract. They need to provide the reliability that's in the contract. Those same measures are not available for the other agencies that are a part of this consortium. So I am confident that they are focused both from a governance perspective, but also on a contractual basis to make sure that this works for us.
Okay, I would say that one of the things we would want to do is to go a little bit beyond that and actually be able to influence the actions that they would take around reliability and so on, because of the experience that we can bring to the table. So my second question is around the costs. When you say, in terms of we should end up even at the end, are we including the cash handling? Because I guess I'm a little bit surprised with that. I would expect that, in fact, the result would be that there would be a net savings. So are we including the cash handling costs, for example, that we now have that would go away when Presto is fully implemented?
We are including those costs. As it stands right now, buses primarily, although our legacy streetcars as well, will continue to have that gravity fare box on them, that glass box that are non-registering that customers drop cash into when they want to travel. We'll be coming back to this board on what the costs of continuing with that are, what the options are, how we can make sure, for example, that our third-party network is robust, that people don't need that facility. So the costs of collecting cash are a big component of that final 7 to 8% of overall revenue. I think that we can provide a solution that means that we can begin to, again, once we are solid on Presto, move away from accepting cash on our surface vehicles.
Okay, because I think that's a question we should come back to in terms of net benefit. And then just my third and final point, on the customer education side, with any new technology, there is, you get the early adopters who are very excited about it and can, will figure out all the steps and don't mind the complications. But for the vast majority of anybody adopting a new technology, everything has to work perfectly. So part of that, getting people to that is really good, clear education and information. I'd like to understand what plans we have there, because I think we can improve that part of it. For example, when we go on the website, there could be much clearer, simpler walkthroughs on how to use the technology. So just really a question around what sort of plans you might be thinking about in that respect.
I mean, right now, we are very focused on telling people that, for now, for the most part, keep using your tickets, your tokens, your Metro passes. That is the message we're giving, because we know that we are not yet ready for a mass migration over to Presto. And as we are doing that, we are working on all of those plans, and how are we going to hold the hand of every customer that has been using tickets for the last 30 years, or has always used a day pass, has always been part of the Metro Pass discount plan, an example, where we send you a card every month. How we reach every one of those different customer constituencies with the right message. Because we also want to make sure that we encourage people when it is right and when it's stable, but also we encourage in a way that hopefully keeps them in the habit of using transit. We don't want this to become the reason why we are driving ridership away.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Mihevik?
Yes, thank you very much, and I certainly appreciate your leadership in this daunting task that has been in the works for a long time, but I think we're kind of getting there. We're kind of getting close. I have two sets of questions. One is around the loss of revenue. People have been coming to me and saying, I really want to pay, Joe, and I just, I touched 5 this week and I didn't, so what I tell them is just give me the money and then I'll give it to Andy Byford. So there's a check coming. No, the issue there is really that a lot of folks who want to pay can't pay, and if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that's not on us, that's on Metrolinx, the Presto company of Metrolinx. Is that just, can you confirm that piece?
That's right. If we are seeing service outages, if we are seeing reliability that is too poor, that goes beyond some sort of threshold of materiality, right? That goes to a fundamental fault on a line or a vehicle where we can actually point to a revenue loss, then the contract is very clear that Presto and Metrolinx are responsible for recouping the TTC for that.
No, well, there's a simple way of doing that. Just to go back and forth a bit. That machine doesn't work. It's on that bus, on the Dufferin line. Right now, I tried to pay, it didn't take off the money. So what happens?
So we would...
You get the call, or you get...
We get the call, then it becomes a maintenance issue to bring that back in. Again, our ridership right now is low enough that, although we're worried about that, our Presto usage right now, it's growing, but it's still low enough that I'm not overly worried about that, although we're keeping a really close eye on it. What the contract contemplates is, we know we take this amount of money on the Dufferin bus, on average across buses or across the line over this time period. We didn't. We know that the reliability of those readers was this. We can actually take that into a direct revenue loss to the TTC and say, Presto, Metrolinx, you're responsible for that loss.
So at some point, when it's kind of all systems go, you're going to do a route-by-route analysis. This is what we used to make. This is what we made during the transition. Metrolinx, here's the bill.
And here is the reliability. Here is what we saw in terms of the number of taps and how often those machines may or may not have been online.
Okay, and for public accountability reasons, we will get that number as the TTC, which means our public will get them as well?
Yes, I think there will have to be a decision of so we've had Presto in the TTC for the last 6 years in a variety of forms. It's growing now. There was always going to be a period here of transition that we are planning around, and the machines aren't going to be as reliable at the beginning. So I think there's got to be a decision of how far back do we roll that, or we say, right, here is the period now, Presto, where we think this is solid, and we are holding you to your accountabilities for what we have promised us.
Right, well, because frankly, right now, our customers, our passengers, I prefer calling passengers, are holding us to account. Like, I actually do get stopped regularly saying, like, what gives, Joe? This is costing the system and this is not good. And I think we owe them a response that says that we are good stewards of our money, and that if there is a problem, we're going to be kept whole as the TTC. I think that's something, frankly, that the board would be, or the commission would be very interested in maintaining.
Okay.
Secondly, around the issue of the big switch. So we still have relatively small numbers right now on the number of people that have switched over to Presto. Is that fair to say?
Yes, yep. So, I mean, the interesting thing is we are moving into second spot on the agencies, though. So we still only have about 5% of people using it, but we're just passing OC Transpo as the second, and we'll soon overtake Go, even at our low numbers of proportion.
Okay, so are you, some of us use Twitter, Facebook, we have email addresses and so on and so forth. And another question that I'm frequently asked is, Joe, should I be buying my Presto now?
Right.
And I say to them, well, you know what? I wouldn't do it yet. You know, my stations aren't in my ward aren't completely, but now they are. Now they're all taking Presto. And yet I'm getting these reports that some of them don't work, so I don't want to tell people to go in too early. When is now? When is the moment when we say, we feel this is really working, and we want to see a massive movement from the old method of payment to the new method of payment?
I think we want to see that massive movement towards the end of next year.
Okay, so continue to trickle?
Yes.
Work out the kinks in the system, and then later on, just say, and I guess we'll be part of a massive
absolutely
advertising campaign or promotional campaign to encourage people to make the switch in the third and fourth quarter of 2017.
I think the fourth quarter.
Fourth quarter,
And
okay.
beginning of 18, and I think that is really down to us being assured that it's solid and we can make a really good promise there.
Right.
But equally, the experience of most agencies that do this find that people don't move away from their preferred method until they are forced to. So people will continue to want to get their MetroPass in the same way they always have until we say, I'm sorry, that product in that form is no longer available, but here's an even better one for you.
Yeah, so it would be fair to say that this 5% are what we might call early adopters, and the early adopters help us to kind of clean up the system and get the technology right. Then there'll be a phase when we do active promotion, and they will be the one who will they're good systems people, and they want to be good to the TTC, and they'll switch over. And then there'll be a third phase of the reluctant switchovers, and they'll be forced to because we're not going to have a legacy system.
That's right.
That they can.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lalonde?
Yeah, when will Presto replace the paper transfer slips?
I mean, because we are now on all buses, or there may be a few stragglers out there, we certainly will be on all buses at the end of the year, and we're in all subway stations, we're in all streetcars. If you are using Presto, you won't need a paper transfer next year.
Do I need to tap on if I transfer from one bus to another bus?
Yes. And the
the
Presto
system
card
already is smart enough to know that it doesn't have to charge me again?
That's right.
Okay.
So there are a number of transfer rules in the system that allow those trips.
So that all already works?
That already works.
Okay. And my other question was, on the paper cards, will we allow customers to store value in those cards beyond just taking a single trip? Like if they want to put $25 on to make 7 or 8 trips, will they be able to do that as well?
No, the plan is not to do that. You would use those paper cards for very specific things. You would use it for a single trip. You might use it as a convention pass. You would use it as a visitor's pass. So if somebody wants a 3-day pass, you would use that card for that. But that limited use media is not meant to be a replacement for the e-purse that is on the plastic Metro Pass.
Right.
Because you can't register it. We want you to register. If it goes through the wash, you'll lose your, there are problems with that cardboard pass.
I'm thinking primarily of the tourist population.
Right. So we would fulfill that via a third-party retailer, potentially partnerships with other agencies. You could potentially buy that paper product, a 3-day pass via rail, for example, as you're coming into the city. But for most circumstances, even though there's a $6 charge there for the Presto card, that money lasts forever. The main encouragement we're giving people is get a Presto card, even if you only travel once or twice a year on it, it is to your advantage.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Crisanti with questions.
Yes, thank you. So what happens currently? So if
someone uses their Presto card, they scan, and it doesn't work. So do they get on the system at no charge, or is there some method of saying, okay, an alternate pay system?
So two things would happen. There are two readers on every bus, so even if the front one is out, then we would encourage them to go to the rear reader and try and tap on that one. If that one also doesn't work, if both readers are out, most of our trips are actually multimodal or involve more than one vehicle. So if they get onto another vehicle, and we know most of our trips are 1.7 legs, so even if they get onto another vehicle or enter a subway station, we would charge them the fare then because it has come off their Presto card. If they are getting onto a bus and none of those readers are working and they are only making that single leg, then the person travels, does not pay that fare now. We don't say to our operators, tell them to get off the bus, because that's our problem, and that's Presto's problem. And that is the stage where we'll have to start to say, and Presto and Metrolinx, that problem is costing us significant money, and that's going to cost you significant money.
Okay. No, I would agree. I'm getting good feedback on the Presto. They love the car actually for two reasons currently. Some people are telling me it's, that it's convenient and it's also free because it doesn't work at times. So it's, and that's not what we want to hear.
No.
No. So having said that, how do we measure that loss? Because I heard something when Councillor Mahevik was asking about Metrolinx sending a bill. Well, how do you arrive at a loss, at a number that they're prepared to say, great, no problem, here's a check?
So ideally, that loss is meant to drive them to improve the reliability. So that's what you really want to happen, is this specter of having to cover our fare losses because the system isn't reliable. You want them to improve the reliability. In terms of calculating it, you would likely do it on historic averages so this bus for the last 52 Fridays has made this amount of money in the same circumstances. This Friday, for no other reason other than we know the readers weren't working, it didn't make any money. So that is the opportunity for us to say that obligation now then rests with Presto.
And they would accept that, in your opinion?
That's the contractual relationship.
And in terms of the kinks that were discussed earlier, are you having good success in identifying the kinks, the problems, and resolutions, so we have more and more of the equipment working versus not working?
I think to date, we've done a good job of firefighting, of getting into the divisions and resetting buses. At the same time we've been doing that, we've been trying to identify, and this is Presto's responsibility, but we're in this with them. So we are in those divisions overnight with our folks as well, figuring out what is it? Is it the cellular modem that connects to the back office? Is it the switch? There are so many pieces in this and so many bits of software, but we are making good progress in identifying what the root causes of some of that unreliability is as well, and putting those fixes out into the field. I talked about the one on the gates already, where we knew we had this problem with gates going out of service because they were pushed on. We put a patch into the field. That was late last week. We think it is performing well and has improved things.
So you said earlier that it's new technology. Well, it's been around for a while in other jurisdictions. So are you saying this is absolutely, totally new compared to what everybody else is using in terms of software?
The concept has been around forever, but the particular implementation of every transit agency is different, because it is different software depending on who your vendor is. That software vendor is not necessarily the hardware manufacturer, so you've got to make those things work together. That hardware that actually vends a card is different from the cellular modem you have on your bus that brings that data back and forth. So all those individual pieces are unique to almost every time you do this in a different city.
All right, thank you.
Vice Chair Heisey, questions?
So why wouldn't we just dispense with Presto altogether and go straight to tap on, tap off with a credit card using the Presto system?
So our customers will be able to do that. They will be able to choose whether or not they do that. The same readers are the Presto readers that let that happen.
Right.
One of the big questions in that is around concessions.
Right.
So you can't set a concession. You can't send a senior rate on a credit card.
Oh, I see.
So a single adult fare is very, very easy using a credit card. having a monthly or those loyalty programs is more difficult. That's what we're driving towards, to have an account that lets you do that. But that's your next iteration.
Okay, and so then the next question that flows from that is, when we get tap on, tap off as being part of this, have we negotiated that arrangement, what the credit card's cut is versus the Presto cut in terms of taking money from the TTC revenue stream?
So rather than tap on, tap off, it's open payment. It's the ability to use a credit card on a thing. A tap on, tap off would be a fare by distance or whatever it happens to be. Those credit card fees are part of the underlying Presto price that we pay. So they are part of that 5.25%. Regardless so the system is the Presto system, whether it's a credit card or a Presto card, and they are paying for those fees.
I see, so that, okay, that's interesting, thanks.
Question?
Someone said this. Is 5.5% a high rate for these transactions?
So when we went to tender on this 5 years ago and came close to doing a deal with a private company, that rate was 5.35%. So we are 0.1% lower than ACS/Xerox, who were the successful tenders 6 years ago. So it is a better rate than what we found through that RFP process. I would add to that by saying the other transit agencies across Ontario would be delighted to get that deal.
Other questions? Commissioner?
Anything else?
No.
Are you good? Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Can I just ask, I understand why we can't do the big marketing education push now because we're just simply not ready. But I'm inundated nonstop with Presto, like how you use it kind of questions, hockey rinks, grocery store, social media. Is there, I guess, two questions. One, is there a thought to ramp that up somewhat? Because there are obviously people who are either concerned, who want to dip their toe into the Presto waters. And secondly, I expect that to have an effective education program, it will be a massive cost for just like the advertising dollars that would have to be spent. And in my estimation, a cost that we can't afford. There is a partner agency that seems to have bundles of money. How is that going to be split or determined for a Toronto and a non-Toronto audience on who pays for what I think will have to be a really rigorous and robust advertising campaign?
I guess there are the two things that I would say there. The first is we are very much in the educational space. So on our website, we can maybe make it more prominent that we have videos that show how to use Presto. We have handouts that we hand out in every station. We have details on there to educate those people that want that education. What we're not doing is actively promoting. We're still trying to educate you when you got it. Here's how you use it. If you buy a Presto card, for example, in one of those gateway units, we hand you that brochure to make sure you know how to go online and set it up and register it. The marketing side, when we finally say, Presto is right for you, and here's what you need to do to make it right for you, there isn't anything particularly in the contract that lays out who pays for that. I think it probably is less a TV buy. It's not that kind of a marketing campaign. Most of these customers are in our system already because they're already using our fare beta. It is using the assets we use now, whether that's 24 hours, whether it's the platform video screens on our stations, whether it's our ability to put messages in all the vehicles and stations. That's where we're probably going to get the biggest bang for the buck, and that is actually a relatively inexpensive way for us to reach most of our customers.
Thank you. And so I guess my other question as a follow-up was, I tend to get the questions the most from the people who aren't that audience.
Right.
The occasional user, the person who's, maybe not as comfortable or used to what we're doing and with the changing technology. And so how, and maybe it's too premature to say this, but how do we get to those who aren't kind of our regulars or are kind of preaching to the converted in a way, where is that occasional user who might need to see it on TV? Or I seem to hear like a Up Express or Metrolinx ad every time I turn on a radio. So there must be a reason to do that. How do we target that audience? And I get that we'll use all our channels.
Yep.
But I see who I get inundated from are those who aren't with the system, and I would think we'd want to get them on.
Right. So I think we'll have to give that some thought. One of the real opportunities comes when we have this third-party retail network in place, because they will equally be actively and interested in helping us to promote this. And you know, that will likely be that Metrolinx are finalizing that deal. It's likely going to be announced in January. We're pleased with where they've managed to get to on that, and I think it will be a really good partner for help us push some of those messages.
Can I, though, safely assume, without moving a motion, that when we'll get an update similar to what we did receive today, whatever it is, 6 months or a year from now, that will detail and highlight some of the things I'm asking about with kind of the, almost that educational marketing plan?
Yes, so I think we need to be coming back here with something similar with more detail every 3 months or so.
Okay.
This year is, although this past year seems like it's been a year of change, that's really the year of installing all the equipment.
Yeah.
It's when we are trying to move the other 95% of our customers over in this year and the beginning of 18, when we really need to get into the details.
Great, thank you very much.
If I could just add, Mr. Chair, I think we're talking about it a lot right now. Next year, we're really going to be talking about it a lot. So I think we're going to see lots of communications and information support for the general public, the occasional user, as you said.
Okay, thank you, thank you. To speak on this, Commissioner Mihevik? Okay.
We're going to get an update about every 90 days? Every 3?
We will begin to get more frequent updates.
More frequent updates,
Yep.
yes. So, yes. That's what I just heard, correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, thanks. So I will move the staff recommendations. All in favor? That carries, thank you. We move to our second last item, and I thank everyone who I know has been waiting for the item we added today. That will be next, but right now we're on item 17, which is a new streetcar delivery and claim negotiation update. We have one speaker presenter, and that's Alan Ewell. You're good to go? Great, I'll start your time.
As of the writing of the December CEO's report, we had only had 27 streetcars in service. By now, we should have almost 100. These streetcars have a mean time between failures of 2 to 3 times better than the much older streetcars at 30 and 40 years older. But the mean time of failure is half that of buses and 18% of the target for these new vehicles. Our legal options under the current contract are nearly maxed out, but there's still that 60 more cars under option. We need these new streetcars, and we need them now. Other Canadian cities are buying rail vehicles from suppliers other than Bombardier. Last month, I suggested we do an RFP for the remaining 60 cars that are still under option. We need these cars just to keep up with our passenger growth on existing routes. Staff was concerned that with a smaller order of only 6 units, we might not get as good a price as the one we have from Bombardier. I agree, we don't know what a 60-unit price would be. I work retail, and I can tell you that price means nothing if you don't have the stock to back up your advertised price. Kitchener-Waterloo's Ion line was supposed to open next year. Now it won't open to 2018. Not because the rails aren't ready, but because they have no Bombardier trains to put on those rails. So if not an RFP, what about an RFI, a request for information? Let us put it out there that we may be looking at buying 60-plus more new streetcars. The price per streetcar is a matter of public record. So are the technical specs required for our trains on the TTC gauge streetcar network. The timeline for delivery for these cars is also a matter of public record. Siemens, Alstom, or some other supplier may want to compete with Bombardier enough to scoop that 60-car option out from underneath them. And to do so in Bombardier's backyard may give them enough of an impetus to get us a price that is comparable to the one we've got from Bombardier now. We won't know unless we ask, so let's ask Bombardier's competitors if they might be interested. This streetcar contract started 4 TTC chairs ago, 3 mayors ago, and 2 TTC heads ago. How long do we have to wait for our streetcars? While my role at the TTC may be hemorrhoidal, part of yours is fiduciary. You have a responsibility to do what's best for the TTC, both financially and operationally, to make our TTC work its best. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? That last comment we'll just avoid for now. Okay, Joe's looking that up for us. Okay, so let's move to questions of staff. Thank you for your presentation. Questions of staff. Commissioner? No. To speak? To move a staff recommendation of receipt, Commissioner Mihevik, all in favor? That carries. Okay, we are on to item 23. We had moved a motion to add 2 deputants. There are additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who would like to speak on this item. So if I could have a motion to add those, and I'll read their names out. Yeah. So on my list right now, we'd already added Councillor Perks and Karen Harrison. There's been a request from, I'm going to go with a lot of first names here in some of these, but from Sonam and Tenzin from the Students for Free Tibet, Botila, Say-Ten from the Tibetan community, an elder from the Tibetan community, Zoe de la Peña, and then Tenzin from the Parkdale Community Legal Services. Have I captured everyone?
Yeah.
So a motion to add those additional speakers. Well, can I add, let's do that first. Okay, go ahead. I'm moving to add those speakers to the list.
And give them each 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, so then the amendment has been to give them, so the amendment has been to have 3 minutes to speak. So the amendment is the 3 minutes. All in favor? Opposed? To add the deputants to the list, all in favor? Great. So we'll start with Councillor Perks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I want to begin by acknowledging that it's very gracious of you to take time at the end of a long commission meeting. I know you have many other pressing matters, and it very much is appreciated that you've agreed to hear this item. I won't go into a lot of detail about why the ad in question is a problem. I'm going to leave that to people from the Toronto Tibetan community to explain to you. I imagine, though, after you've heard it, you will understand that this is a grave and very serious issue for this commission. People often who have no other means of transportation are traveling the system you provide, your customers, and seeing an ad that is, well, the word offensive doesn't begin to capture it, and you'll understand that better in a moment. I understand that there's a legal and procedural framework that you go through for handling complaints about ads like this. I understand you've been through that process, but I want to encourage you to go further. As these are the people that you are in charge with delivering this service to, and as you will hear about the profound impact it has on them, I think it's important in this instance to go still further. Yes, the Chinese government could be in a position to take legal action against the Commission if you decide to take the ad off or refuse to run future versions of this ad. But I think that actually is your duty as representatives of these Torontonians who will be speaking to you today. Do listen to them carefully. Do give serious consideration to the service that you're required to provide and the circumstances that these Torontonians find themselves in riding on your service, looking at these ads. And again, thank you very much for taking time in your busy day to hear these deputations that will be coming.
Thank you. So next on the list is Karen Harrison. Welcome. I'll start your time. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, committee and Commissioner. I'm Reverend
Karen Harrison. I'm an ordained Buddhist minister, and I'm also the director of the Canadian Buddhist Civil Liberties Association. I was shocked to see these ads. As a Canadian Buddhist who wears a Canadian Buddhist robe, at times on my travel in the TTC, I have been personally assaulted as a Canadian Buddhist. I've been assaulted by members of the Chinese government working out of the consulate on George Street. My concern is for the safety not only of the Tibetan community. If we had more time, we would have had members of the Chinese Canadian Buddhist community here, the Vietnamese Canadian Buddhist community here, and the Sri Lankan and other communities here. These ads are offensive. They denigrate the Tibetan Canadian community, their culture, their religion, and it is just shocking to see such ads on the TTC. I really feel that they need to be removed immediately for not only the safety of the Tibetan community riding the TTC, but also for some members of the Chinese community in the city who are also feeling unsafe because of these ads. And myself, as a Canadian-born, Canadian Buddhist woman, I must say, it is offensive to see buildings that are respected, that are sacred in these ads, shown to be as desecrated as they are. I must ask you, out of human decency, to remove these ads immediately. They violate our rights and the Canadian Constitution as Canadian citizens to ride in safety on the TTC. Thank you. And I do come from a police family, proud that my grandfather served as the chief inspector on the Toronto Police Force, and the concern is for the safety of the Tibetan people in the city and also for the Buddhist Torontonians riding the TTC. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. You may want to stay put. You may have questions. And I think you do have one from our Vice Chair, Heisey.
So I had a question. There is such a thing as public advocacy advertising, which I guess some of the people who are going to be talking to us today think that the ads about Tibet are. Has your group or people that you're affiliated with considered using the same ad mechanism to promote their point of view, to provide the competing point of view on our vehicles?
I don't think racism and promotion of hatred towards a group of people and denigration towards a group of people such as the Tibetan Canadians, denigrating their culture, their religious system, or denigrating a Buddhist culture publicly on a Canadian transit system is necessary at all, nor do I believe that either the Tibetan community or the Buddhist community should have or bear the expense of educating the public around racism and religious discrimination. I believe that is the public and this municipal government that should be doing that job.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Next on our list from the Students for a Free Tibet Canada, Sonam and Tenzin.
Hello, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge various members of the Tibetan community, organizations, as well as supporters that are here today. Can you please all rise? These Tibetans represent only a fraction of the Tibetans as well as supporters that have been offended by these ads. My name is Sonam Choki, and I am the National Director at Students for Free Tibet Canada. a grassroots nonprofit organization that works in solidarity with Tibetans inside of Tibet in their struggle for freedom and independence. When we first found out about these ads, we knew that we had to take action. We started an online campaign where we got various Tibetans and supporters to call in to complain. After clearly more than 5 complaints, we sent an email to Andy Byford, and we exchanged emails with Sharon, who's the head of the communications. Unfortunately, our requests to meet with decision makers and authorities of the TTC were rejected multiple times. We also held a protest last Wednesday, and we were refused a meeting with any of the decision makers. The nature of our work requires us to keep a close eye on any developments inside Tibet. Recently, on December 8th, a 31-year-old Tibetan man, Tashi Rupten, self-immolated inside Tibet for the cause of Tibet. This makes the 146th Tibetan person to set themselves on fire. 146 men, women, mothers and fathers, nuns and monks, children as young as 16 years old have set their bodies on fire. Many of them calling for the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as well as for freedom for Tibetans inside of Tibet. Along with this, Tibetans risk their lives every day to peacefully stage solo protests, oftentimes with the portrait of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Our organization has to deal with these types of urgent cases inside Tibet all the time. We are constantly bombarded with graphic images of charred bodies, violent beatings of innocent Tibetans, and peaceful protests that are met with violent crackdowns. So I'm sure you will understand how it would feel for someone who knows these things, for someone who has ancestors who are from Tibet, to have to see this on our commute on the subway. I feel like the Chinese government now has a reach and has infiltrated the TTC, a space I once felt was safe. I thought about my father who had fled Tibet on the back of his sister when he was 5 years old. I would like to share with you a comment made by a young Tibetan who was studying at York University. He shared these thoughts with us when he saw these ads. I was tired after studying many hours for final exams and pleased to be going home. I took the express bus from York University to Dansview Station and considered taking a nap during my 40-minute commute home. Then when I got on the train, I saw this ad hanging beside me. First, I didn't pay attention, but the word Tibet intrigued me, and I looked closer. Instantly, my whole body became covered by goosebumps. There were so many thoughts racing through my head. For someone who doesn't know the real situation in Tibet, they might think and look at this and think, wow, Tibet has been totally developed under the Chinese Communist government. For me, looking at it is unbearable. It triggered memories back to when I was in a Chinese school in Tibet. There were so many pictures just like that ad in my textbook, which was specifically printed for us Tibetan students. We were forced to look at these pictures and memorize poems about how the communist government has changed Tibet into a better place. We had to look at such pictures every day and recite the poems as part of our morning prayer. If we refused, we were punished. One way of being punished was being forced to stand outside on the ice in our bare feet. I always wondered why only Tibetan children had to recite these poems praising the communist government and not Chinese students. My life in Tibet occupied by China was similar to the life here of Aboriginal children in residential schools. I didn't want to join the Chinese school, but I had no choice. If I didn't go, my parents had to pay a huge fine. Chinese school was like residential school. We were not allowed to say Buddhist prayers, we were not allowed to make friends with fellow Tibetans, and we were ashamed for speaking Tibetan. The motto of our school was, "We love China, we speak Chinese." When I was looking at this ad on the Toronto TTC, all those thoughts haunted me again. Since the old Tibet and the new Chinese Tibet, millions of Tibetans have lost their lives. Because of the Chinese invasion, thousands of Tibetans have had to flee to different countries around the world to become refugees. Being a refugee is hard. I left my home 11 years ago when I was 14, and since then I have not seen the faces of my parents.
I can just ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay. So this statement obviously shows you what it feels like to be a Tibetan, to have to commute on the subway to see these very, very offensive ads. I'm here today to ask you, the TTC board, to take a stand. Say no to the Chinese government's propaganda. Say no to these hurtful and racist ads. Remove these ads and apologize to the Tibetan community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? No, thank you very much for your presentation. Next, I believe, is Butila. Welcome. I will set your time. You have 3 minutes. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'd like to use my time to explain why this ad promoted by China's State Agency for Tourism is such an affront to all people who respect human rights and believe in human dignity. To do so, you need to know the background and the context of this ad. Who is promoting it and what is their objective for doing so? This is not a poster promoting tourism, it's propaganda. First, old culture refers to China's perspective of Tibet as a dark feudal society where its people were enslaved. New Tibet refers to Chinese government's effort to bring Tibet into the modern Chinese world, which is further supported by the stamp at the bottom right of the ad, which clearly states that Tibet is part of China. The old culture is what prompted China to, as they assert, liberate Tibet. Liberate Tibet is Chinese euphemism for invading an independent state. Modernizing Tibet is Chinese code word for ethnic and religious cleansing. The lower image of the ad is more realistically of a Chinese outpost. In 1959, China invaded Tibet. The Chinese troops entered Tibet. Hundreds and thousands of innocent Tibetans were killed, tortured, imprisoned, separated from families, starved, sent to labor camps. China has now illegally occupied Tibet for almost 60 years. Tibet is under martial law. International media, UN observers, even Tibetans are not allowed inside. These human rights abuses against Tibetans are well documented by international human rights organizations. China's claims to have modernized Tibet is actually Chinese government political agenda to assimilate Tibet into China. Old culture, new Tibet is really a catchphrase for genocide. The intention to destroy Tibetan people to make it palatable. People who understand the situation inside Tibet and the Chinese government and how its agencies work immediately recognize that the TTC was duped into promoting Chinese government propaganda. The TTC has failed to do its due diligence. These posters would like you to think that they're promoting tourism. They do not. By making comparisons of a new versus old Tibet, this actually is propaganda supporting Chinese government's colonization of Tibet, which in turn reinforces their fallacious argument that they did so to liberate Tibetans. The TTC is a service provider, and as someone who takes the TTC, this poster poisons my environment based on my race, ancestry, creed, ethnic origin, and for many Tibetans, their place of origin. I believe this constitutes a breach of the Ontario Human Rights Code. Mr. Byford and the TTC's defense is that the Supreme Court of Canada decision that public transit must be accepting of advertising that may be deemed offensive. That's not quite on the mark. My concern isn't about trying to muzzle advertising on the TTC. It's the combination of the text, the images, and the topic that is very offensive. And the TTC's failure to remove this ad after many complaints by the community is what I feel constitutes differential treatment. Ironically, the TTC provides that they treat everyone with respect and dignity, regardless of race, ancestry, place of origin, and religion. So today, I'm here to ask the board to direct the TTC to immediately remove this ad and apologize to the Tibetan community. To borrow from the TTC, this would be the better way.
Thank you very much. You have a question, so maybe if you don't mind, Commissioner Mahavik?
Thank you. So could you describe a little bit why this ad is offensive in this context? Like, there's obviously a lot of people really upset about it. What's happening in Tibet now that relates to this particular ad?
Thanks for asking that question, and it's very important to understand what's happening inside Tibet in order to understand this ad. So basically what's happening inside is that Tibet is under martial law, as I said. The Chinese development, so to speak, is basically referring to their network of roads and railways, and which go into holy mountains that not only pollute sacred spaces, but also facilitate the transfer of hundreds and thousands of Chinese settlers into Tibet to overtake the Tibetan population. Chinese government has expelled nomads from their lands. They've been forced into resettlement into remote locations that lack adequate schools, health clinics. There are few employment opportunities, if any. Basically, the treatment of Tibetans inside Tibet by China is similar to the treatment of indigenous people here in Canada and in North America by European colonialists. Tibetans inside Tibet today face cultural and linguistic extinction. They are marginalized socially, economically, and there's religious oppression as well inside Tibet.
So would your argument be, at the end of the day, that the human rights violations in Tibet, which I think frankly many of us here would agree with, that those exist and have existed for a very, very long time, that they would be, that we should make a stronger case and listen to that argument more strongly than, say, the case for freedom of expression through advertising?
I don't think it's a matter of that. I think that by these ads having this message, which is basically trying to legitimize the occupation of Tibet, be in our public spaces, is basically reinforcing that message. And that, I believe, is discriminatory, because that's not the TTC's role.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Next, we have Satan. Satan from the Tibetan community. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I'll start your time, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes.
Welcome.
Okay. My name is Satan Badisang, and as a Tibetan, I feel very offended to see this racist propaganda ads on our public transit. Why? Because I think I felt the real, the real oppression by myself. When I was 3 years old, I lost my country. My father arrested, jailed, tortured, and he died. And then, in year 1987, I went to see my relatives in Tibet. At that time, I was 29 years old. So, and there was a peaceful protest against the Chinese regime. So I went to see the protest, and what I saw there was they are beating our monks and nuns with electric rod. So then I felt so offended, and I hurled stone at them, So they have the gun, I have the stone only. So then, later on, we were arrested. A young monk got shot on his head, a bullet on his head. He died in front of me. And later on, they shoot at me. I still have a bullet mark on my right leg. So then again, now I'm turning into 60 years old, and I'm seeing this, like racist propaganda ads on our public transit, which is not right at all. It is kind of Chinese, Chinese tool to brainwash our, people who travel by the transit. So I felt so offended, and please remove this. I'm pleading you guys to remove this ad as soon as possible. Please put the ethical values before the profit, please. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Next on the list is Zoe de la Peña. Thanks for coming. I'll start your 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for having me. As you can see, I am not a Tibetan person. I am just an average non-Tibetan Torontonian, I guess. And I was riding the TTC a while ago, and I saw this ad. And this ad made me really, really angry. First and foremost, it is deceptive. Against the will of the Tibetan people and government, China occupied Tibet 60 years ago, yet the ad refers to Tibet as Tibet, China. It also completely erases all of the violence that China has committed in Tibet over the past 60 years that still continue to this day. Ironically, the advertisement features a picture of a stupa, which is a sacred Buddhist structure that houses relics. Yet since their occupation, China has not hesitated to destroy many of Tibet's sacred structures. Even today, earlier this month, China proceeded with plans to demolish sections of one of the largest monasteries in eastern Tibet, expelling their residents. Radio Free Asia reported that more than 800 nuns from that monastery are now being housed in camps. The ad's erasure of this violence is violent in and of itself, furthering the process of cultural genocide through airbrushing the atrocities that China has committed and eliminating the actual history and people of Tibet. This ad is akin to a poster from Nazi Germany showing a synagogue with the caption, "Old Culture, New Germany." It is offensive and disgusting. Please remove it from TTC vehicles and property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think you have any questions. Thanks for your presentation. Now it is, I'd like to ask Tenzin Nawang from the Parkdale Community Legal Services. Welcome. I'll start your 3 minutes now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tenzin, and I sit on the board for the Tibetan Women's Association of Ontario. I'm also an organizer at Parkdale Community Legal Services. We are a neighborhood legal clinic that provides legal representation and advice to low-income clients in our catchment. I work in the immigration division at Parkdale. Most of our clients are refugees and migrants. Many of them are Tibetans. We've helped many people who've escaped Tibet, but who still have family there, mothers, fathers, wives, and children. They cannot return to Tibet. Even initiating contact with family members in Tibet puts their families at risk. Many of our clients are twice displaced, having spent time in India and Nepal after escaping Tibet. When I walked in, I noticed that Tsewang Tundup was here. He's sitting behind me. In 2008, Tsewang was shot twice by Chinese police for being part of a peaceful protest in Tibet. He managed to escape to India after almost a year hiding in the mountains from the Chinese government. He now calls Toronto home. I had a chance to visit Tibet in 2004. What I saw was not the new Tibet the ads in question show. Lhasa, the city shown in the ad, seemed like a militarized zone, with police presence at every intersection. My guide, a Tibetan man, and our driver, also Tibetan, were routinely subjected to questions and asked for identity documents. A number of international human rights organizations have conducted investigations into the situation in Tibet. Year after year, they find that Tibet remains one of the most repressive regimes in the world. China's efforts to paint a pristine Tibet is out of touch with reality. There is a jarring contrast between the Tibet of Chinese propaganda and the real Tibet. Tibet is an occupied country. Its people, my people, are subject to gross human rights abuses by the world's largest authoritarian state. I am disappointed at the response given by the TTC Advertising Review Group. How is it possible that this ad did not violate the Canadian Code of Advertising Standards and the Ontario Human Rights Code? Why does the TTC think an ad promoting an occupied country subject to gross human rights violations as a tourist destination paid for by its oppressor is okay? These are questions the TTC board must answer. Perhaps it is time for the TTC to review its own policy regarding advertising. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. I don't think you have any questions. Thank you. So those are our added deputants. Now we'll have questions of staff from commissioners. Commissioner Mihevik to start.
Yes. I'm going to ask a question of our legal staff. What are our legal obligations here? And I'd ask it to also comment on what our community standard responsibilities are here as a commission.
Okay, my name is Brian Leck. I'm General Counsel with the TTC. And let me start off by saying I'm very sorry to hear about the very difficult circumstances in Tibet and some of the experiences you and others have encountered through personal experiences or through friends and relatives in Tibet. What I would like to do is to outline briefly for you the legal principles and guidelines that apply, the criteria, and then secondly, the process. And that's for your understanding and ultimately for the board's understanding, because they have the ultimate authority to decide how to go forward. The leading case, it's a 2009 decision of the Supreme Court of Canada, is a case involving a transit property, Greater Vancouver Transportation Authority versus the Canadian Federation of Students. And it involves some advertising that students put up on the side of a bus that caused a lot of people some concerns. The Supreme Court of Canada in that case decided that the charter applies to transit authorities, that they are agents of the government, and charter rights, obligations, responsibilities apply. So in this case, the charter applies. The second thing they decided is that there is a a right to freedom of expression, subject to various controls and limitations, but a right to freedom of expression that includes the right to have advertisements on the side of a bus or in other locations in public transit properties. The transit property said effectively, look, we want to have a welcoming, safe environment, and this type of advertising is inconsistent with that, and it should be removed. The Supreme Court of Canada decided, and it was a decision of the entire court, they decided that no, that's not the test. The test is that it must be truly offensive. It must be something that is absolutely discriminatory in terms of content, and they used the example of something that would advocate violence and terrorism, so a very, very high threshold. And their comment was that in a free and democratic society, it involves reasonable people and people all around society having disagreements about their interpretation of things and their expression of views, and that some amount of controversy needs to be put up with. And it needs to reach this high threshold of truly offensive messaging before it is subject to a transit property rejecting it. Under our policy, there's a requirement that TDC comply with the law. And as the previous speaker mentioned, the law includes things like the Human Rights Code, the Canadian Advertising Code, and various other legislation, as well as this particular Supreme Court of Canada case. So that's what governs, and those are the criteria that govern anyone who is sitting down to decide, is this advertising permissible? Should it be allowed to remain in a transit system? In this case, there's a process that is set out in the TTC policy, a policy that the Supreme Court of Canada case said every transit property should have, a policy that should be followed as a guide to how you deal with these types of situations. The TDC policy says that you are able to have a review done of any advertisement if there are 5 complaints made. And that's a very low threshold. 5 people can trigger a review of whether it's appropriate to allow an advertisement to continue on transit property. In this case, that process was followed. The 5 complaints came in. A advertisement working group under the policy met. They reviewed the advertisements. That group comprised of members of the TDC board as well as staff, and they came to the conclusion that the advertisements did not violate the law. It did not reach that threshold of discrimination. It did not reach that threshold of being truly offensive in a way that broke the law. I wasn't a member of that group, and I can't comment beyond that what their discussion was, but things like these are a matter of interpretation. A reasonable person looking at this particular advertisement, how would they interpret this? And it may not be something that you find that gels with your particular political views or your outlook. You may find it distasteful, but that doesn't mean it's not something that can continue in a particular transit system's advertising program. In this case, my understanding is that that committee did a review of this, had discussions, and came to a conclusion that the advertisement should continue. That decision under the TDC policy is described as being a final decision. I also understand that the Canadian Advertising Organization was approached and that they rejected dealing with this at all because it was a political type of advertising. So the national group that has guidelines and reviews advertising across Canada refused to become involved. I understand that this advertisement is in place for 2 more days. If I'm incorrect about that, someone can correct me. But then it comes down in the normal course. I would certainly be prepared, as the last speaker suggested, to have staff conduct a review of the TTC advertising policy. There may be some things that we can look at that might improve the functioning of that policy, that might be something that we can update in various ways that make it a better policy that better serves the community. But in this case, due process was followed. All the steps were taken. There was a meeting, there was discussion, and there was a decision made in accordance with the policy, and that's where we're at today.
Thank you.
I'm assuming you're going to give me some latitude.
I don't know, that was your question. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I didn't, honestly, I didn't set that up, but thank you for answering. Thank you for answering your question. If I own Hudson's Bay Company and this ad is put up on the side of my building, I own it, I can take it down because my customers don't like it. If I hear you right, what you're saying is this is in a different category because it's kind of public space or quasi-space. Can we take it down order it taken down? And it's not so much this one because, as you say, this is over in 2 days, but it might come again. And so we want to be prepared for the next time. Can we take it down because we want to, because it offends our customers? Do we have that authority?
The Supreme Court of Canada defined offensive in the way that I mentioned earlier, which is a very high threshold involving things like, and it wasn't exclusive to these things, but things like discrimination, clear discrimination, in advocating violence, advocating terrorism. So those were examples they gave of the type of things that you might need in order to meet that threshold. The difference between Hudson's Bay and the TTC is that the charter applies to the TTC, and the decision and the criteria set out in the Supreme Court of Canada apply to the TTC in a way that they may not apply to private companies.
So your view is that they have a legal ability to continue to put some ads out in the future, and we are powerless as the TTC, either our advertising review committee or the commission itself, to stop it. Is that at the end of the day where you're landing the plane?
My view is, and it's always subject to the board is the ultimate authority and decision maker, but my view is there's a due process that has been set up, a TTC policy that guides decision-making process, involves members of the board and involves staff. That process was duly followed, a decision was made, and that's the result that applies not only in this case, but in many other advertising cases. If there's a desire to change that process, that can be reviewed, and that's something that we're all open to.
If we directed that the ad be taken down, are we liable?
I'd prefer not to answer that question in public. I think there's a process that we have in place, a policy, like any other policy and process, that should be followed. In this case, it was, and that, in my view, is one resolution that may not be appropriate to challenge it in this way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? After some thoughtful contemplation, go ahead. Go ahead.
I heard, yes, earlier that the complaint process allows for a review if 5 or more people actually come forward to complain. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
And that did happen?
Yes.
Is there an appeal process through the actual policy we have?
Based on the policy, the decision of that advertising working group is final.
And when's the last time the policy was reviewed? Been a while, right?
I understand 2 years, but I have no personal knowledge of
About 2 years. And this is final question, and this particular ad in question is due to come down in 2 days, correct?
That's my understanding, correct.
So is that, you're confirming it is?
It comes down on Friday.
On Friday. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a motion to move, or do others want to speak first?
Briefly.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'd like to say that I'm a little sorry that we didn't have the ad up during the discussion, so we could sort of make a judgment about it while we discussed it, good or bad. I would say that it's pretty obvious to me it's a provocation to Tibetan nationalists. I don't know, and I do know Tibetan history, and I'm familiar with many of the things that were said today. The one good thing about this ad is it's led to a conversation today that's brought attention to what's happened in Tibet. It's not an issue that's discussed very often in the West, and maybe the Chinese government has done you a favor by poking you. I would say that we have a process, I think the chairman's going to talk about it, and freedom of speech has a price, which is that sometimes we have conversations that are unpleasant. But sometimes the unintended consequence of freedom of speech is you learn something new, and I think some people who were here today learned some new things about Tibet. So I thank you for your deputations. I don't think as a practical matter anything we do now would have any meaning because the ad has only 2 days to go. But there is a new ad probably coming, and there'll be a new review is my expectation, and there'll be probably a new complaint by 5 new people. And that's part of continuing a conversation that sounds to me like is very important. So that's all I have to say about it.
Great, thank you. Any other speakers? I'll just start my, I have a motion that you can maybe place, asking for staff to review the policy. And I think a couple deputants and Councillor Perks had mentioned that with this ad, if this is deemed to be, has been approved, then there might be a question or a problem with the policy. And so I think that's where we have to shift this conversation, this analysis. I actually found the ad distasteful, and I appreciate everyone coming down to give kind of some context to it that we wouldn't have otherwise had. At the same time, understand some of the limitations that we're bound by as an organization, and then as at this point coming to the board. And so I think Vice Chair Heisey touched on a good point that despite this coming down in a couple days, my guess is there's another one coming. And probably be as poorly done and as poor taste as this. And so I move my motion in as much as to look back on what got us here with this specific ad, but to give us maybe some better guidance and tools at our disposal for when inevitably we're going to be having a discussion like this again, unfortunately probably sooner than later. And so I hope that can get us to a point in a process where either this does not happen, or at least the people who feel offended one way or another on either side of an issue feel that the process is one that's fair and even-minded. So I move this and open to any questions from commissioners on that.
No, Mr. Chair, that's a very good motion. I think everyone here will support it. I was wondering if we should have a timeline on that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I'll look to staff for some help here. If you need 30 days or 60 days, at which board meeting would be reasonable to ask you to come back? And, considering what we heard here today. The sooner the better. 60?
So why don't we just say, can we just say first quarter? Is that that okay? So we know it's going to come in the first quarter of 17?
That's fair. So I just want to make sure it doesn't get delayed too far.
Great, thank you. So that's a friendly amendment. All in favor? That carries. Before I move a motion to adjourn, because I think that's our last item, I just want to highlight, I did this last year, but the numbers kind of astound me, that in 2016, and I appreciate all of you who stuck around to keep quorum, we had, between subcommittees and commission meetings, we had 20 meetings and dealt with over 230 items. And so thank you to commissioners for putting all that work in, but also thanks to all the staff who write those reports, actually implement the work and the recommendations that we approve, and certainly for clerk staff for all the hard work they do to make these meetings happen. Thank you for everyone for always attending. And with that, I'll wish everyone the best of the season and move a motion to adjourn. All in favor? That carries.
How are you? No, oh, I've done that actually before Shelley. Oh, really? So it was actually a Toronto Sun ad where they had their sex columnist, the Edward name, who had her legs provocatively shown. And Casey pulled it. I remember having a chat with Paul Godfrey at the National Trade Center we were laughing about what a character this columnist was. And that led to actually establishing a review policy. So it wasn't just a matter of Lynn Hilborn getting his dander up over a university population. Well, I don't drive, so that's... Just a young woman, I'm not sure if she was presented or a business spokesperson. We have something for everything. A good goal, a good goal. The TTC has rejected several ads. Brought to taste. And I would for example, the business of rejecting Ashley Madison, I don't think would survive the state Supreme Court. I agree. And it was a unanimous ruling, 8-0. And what it was a BC Students Association brought the ads supporting Palestinians against the incursions of the Israeli government. There's a direct analogy. Similar to the York University conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. And I would